and the group is quite advanced when it comes to embracing renewable energy. So please give a warm welcome to Birgit Hensel. She's head of Go Green, which is a department of Deutsche Post DHL. And we look forward to your insights and what you have to share with us, Birgit.
Thank you. Good morning, Director General Adnan Amin, gentlemen and ladies. A very warm welcome from my side here. On behalf of Deutsche Post DHL Group, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Renewable Energy Day hosted by IRENA here today. As a partner of COP23 and neighbor of the UN Climate Secretariat here in Bonn, it's really an honor and a pleasure to make our facilities available for today's event. I very much hope you feel comfortable here in our home and enjoy your time here in the Post Tower. Deutsche Post DHL Group and the Climate Secretariat share not only a common home base here in Bonn, but also common goals. As the world's largest logistics company, we also pursue an ambitious sustainability agenda. In line with the Paris Agreement and the 2-degree goal, we plan, for example, to reduce all of our logistics-related emissions to zero by the year 2050. More explanation you can find there on the wall. In order to realize our environmental and climate protection goals, down the road, we are busy today reinventing logistics. We are testing and implementing numerous new ideas with great enthusiasm and commitment. The innovative capital of our company is considerable, to be sure. Nevertheless, we will not be able to achieve our climate protection targets on our own. For that, we need more collaboration and even more extensive networks. This is why we have partnered with the International Renewable Energy Agency and other renowned institutions. Wherever you find the private sector, public sector, and civil society working together in the spirit of partnership, that's where you will find the biggest and most effective contributions being made. This is why today we will be taking advantage of the opportunity to further strengthen our climate protection partnerships, and will continue doing this into the future. The Fiji Islands, for which the threat of rising sea levels is particularly real and immediately, presides over COP23 as the presidency. Fiji's traditional drua canoe is a strong symbol, a reference to the fact that we are all in the same boat. We had the honor of transporting this canoe to the conference, which was also a chance to show what is possible today in the area of green logistics and what has become part of everyday business for us. Teardrop trailers for environmental friendly road transport, carbon offsetting through climate protection projects, capacity optimization, and e-mobility. We are very proud to have been trusted with a precious artifact. And I'd like to wish all of you here today an insightful and successful Renewable Energy Day with IRENA. Thank you very much. And so far, I hand over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Birgit Hensel, for making us feel so welcome here in your building. So now, ladies and gentlemen, let me wish you once again a very, very good morning. Your Excellencies, ministers, distinguished guests, members of the press, I'm told, are here as well. And welcome to Renewable Energy Day, sort of halfway through COP23 here in Bonn, Germany. And I know that many of you already spent many, many days here being very, very busy. So we really appreciate you coming and to joining our event today on this, at the moment still dreary, but not yet that rainy Sunday. So maybe that's a good omen. As you know, today's conference is hosted by IRENA in concert with the government of Fiji in its capacity as COP president, the government of Germany, the government of the United Arab Emirates, and Deutsche Post DHL Group. Now, my name is Monica Jones. I'm a business anchor at German international broadcaster Deutsche Welle, also known as DW, in Berlin, not here in Bonn. But it's my great pleasure to be here in Bonn today with you in order to guide you through today's sessions. You probably know that this is the third year in a row that the spotlight is put squarely on what is arguably the single most solution to the problem of climate change, and that is decarbonization on a large scale by embracing renewables, not by 10% or 20%, but 100%. Now, this requires, of course, the willingness to think out of the box, to be open to change, and most importantly, to take the people with us along the process. We're required to walk the talk. I'm sure you've heard that many times in the course of COP23 and before. It's a tall order, we're aware of that, but that's why we're here today, to also hear about things that are happening already and take our cue from those stories. We can look forward to stellar panels, speakers who will discuss what's driving energy transformation and by whom. We will meet some movers and shakers from the world of politics, industry, science. Some very interesting people. Will be able to quiz them about their energy visions and, most importantly, their practical approach. So we can look forward to a comprehensive and jam-packed conference day with a nice little lunch break in between to keep you all motivated and on your feet. Now, before I hand over and introduce your host of this conference and first speaker, just a few housekeeping information for you, which is important. First of all, there's a cloakroom out there. So if you arrived with luggage, obviously you can leave it there, coats as well. Anything you don't want to carry with you, just leave it in the cloakroom. If you've parked in the garage below, don't worry, you will not get a ticket or have to pay a steep price. Today's parking in P2 is for free and you can leave after the conference, no problem. For those of you who are smokers, you're not allowed to smoke here in the building. So during the lunch break, which of course would be the ideal moment, you would have to take the lift to the ground floor, and then there's a staircase leading you to a courtyard. There are 2 bicycles standing. This is actually the smoke corner. I'm sure somebody will point you in the right direction. Very important, when you registered, you should have all received a little card with the Wi-Fi name and password. If you haven't, then the Wi-Fi is called Mission 2050, and the password is 0 emissions, 0 as the digit, not written. And that brings me to social media. Social media, very important, already everywhere. We're part of social media as well, so if you want to tweet about the conference, I'd encourage you to do so. Then please use the hashtag Renewables for Climate. You should be able to see this up on the screen as well. Now, while you need to use your phones, of course, for this task, please be sure to put them on silent. I love music, but not all around, and certainly not when we do have speakers on stage. So please be sure to put them on silent. There won't be official coffee breaks today, but don't be alarmed. There is coffee, tea, mineral water, juices standing by outside for you throughout the conference day. So whenever you're thirsty, just leave the room, get yourself a drink, and return with a drink in here so you don't miss anything. We will have, as I mentioned, a very nice lunch break starting at 12:30. It'll be almost 1.5 hours long, so there you can do all your networking, talking, and obviously have a bite to eat. And this evening, right after the end of the conference, there will be a reception, and you're all invited to join us. During the sessions, certainly during the panel rounds here, you are welcome to ask your questions if time allows. So we always have to bear that in mind. And at this point, I would like to ask you already to keep it short and to the point. Do not use your questions as an intervention and holding a monologue, because I'm afraid, certainly when I hold the session, I will be very brutal and cut you off. So if you want to ask a question, keep it short and keep it to the point. And I think this is all you need to know at this moment. So I would like to introduce you now and hand over to Adnan Amin. He's the Director General of IRENA. Please do give him a very, very warm welcome.
Thank you, Monica, for that very high energy introduction to the day. I'm sure it's going to be renewable throughout the day. And I'm sure you will not be brutal, but your smile will indicate when we have to stop. So, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good friends, colleagues, it's really a pleasure to welcome you here for Renewable Energy Day. And I'm confident that we're going to have a very interesting and very intensive and very enlightening day in the hours ahead. We have some extraordinary speakers bringing very special insights into where we are in the ongoing energy transformation. And suffice it to say, it is moving much faster than anybody anticipated, and it is going to be much more fundamental for our economies and societies than anybody is yet aware. And I think that many of us in this room already are seeing this. But let me start by thanking our co-organizers, the government of Fiji. We were hoping to have the Prime Minister here, but I think that he's detained by a number of important events that are going on. I'd like to thank Germany, Rainer Bake is here, for your support, and to the UAE, but especially to our hosts in Deutsche Post DHL Group. We heard the wonderful introduction from you. Up to now, I have always been very proud that we have probably the most sustainable building in the Middle East in Abu Dhabi, which is our headquarters, with all innovative features and very modern. So I'm wondering a little bit, I don't want to do any comparisons, but I hope you are not beating us on the metrics on sustainability. It's very, very good to be here, and thank you for your very generous hospitality and your support for this meeting. The Deutsche Post DHL Group is setting the bar very high in the industry by aiming to reduce all logistics-related emissions to zero by 2050. That's extraordinary for a global group of this scale and this scope. Zero net emissions by 2050. And let me also say, it's also a special pleasure to be here in Germany, the front-runner country in the energy transition and the home of the Energiewende, which has inspired so many of IRENA's 180 countries to move forward together in the global Energiewende that is increasingly taking hold across the world. And it's an even greater pleasure to be here in the city of Bonn, which is IRENA's second home with our Innovation and Technology Office, and the birthplace of our agency in a way where our founding conference took place in 2009. And great to be here, and the mayor will be with us later in the day. So ladies and gentlemen, it's only a few years ago when IRENA was established, and many people were either not convinced or not aware of the need for energy transformation or the role that renewables could play in this respect. But since then, dramatic cost reductions and technological innovation and enabling policies have led to an unprecedented growth of renewables that has exceeded all expectations. Last year, renewable power generation capacity increased by a record 161 gigawatts, more than half of total power generation capacity additions in the global power sector. Investment in renewable energy exceeded $270 billion last year, and today we are seeing around the world that renewables are competitive with conventional energy sources in many parts of the world, and sometimes the technology of choice. The surge of renewable energy has been driven by a business case which has never been stronger. Solar and wind projects are now offered routinely for $3 a kilowatt hour and even less in many parts of the world, and we will hear about that in the course of the day. And recently, in our host city of Abu Dhabi, the contract for solar PV park for 1.17 gigawatts was signed for a record low price of $2.42 a kilowatt hour. And last April, Germany announced that it had accepted its first subsidy-free offshore wind auction bid with a record low weighted average of $4.67 per megawatt hour, less than a tenth of the previous offshore wind deal. And we see also in the UK in the course of the last year that offshore wind came in at half the price of nuclear generation, which has caused a rethink in energy policy in the UK today. And a new record for CSP was set in Dubai last September, where 700 megawatts were awarded a 7.3 US cents per kilowatt hour with storage. This is the first time that we have 24-hour CSP solar with storage at that price. This is an indicator and a signpost really to the future. These downward cost trends are remarkable and expected to continue. Our analysis finds that the cost for solar PV could drop by a further 60% in the next decade, offshore wind by 35%, and concentrated solar by almost 45%, just in the next decade. And looking at the planned investments, and we will focus on that a little bit in China, the planned investments in CSP will be a strong cost reduction driver in the future. And we're expecting similar trends in battery storage costs. Our latest reports and analysis shows that by 2030, total installed costs could fall between 50% and 60%, transforming the energy landscape both for stationary and mobile applications for batteries. In addition to its strong business case, the global driver to address climate change is providing a further impetus to the development of renewables. The urgency has never been greater. Last month, the World Meteorological Organization announced that the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere surged to a record-breaking speed in 2016 and was the highest level estimated in 800,000 years. I was not sure about that number, I checked. 800,000 years, the highest level of carbon emissions. And rising levels of air pollution in large cities are taking a major toll on public health and economic activity. Recently, the Lancet Commission on Pollution and Health found that air pollution kills roughly 6.5 million people each year. The human and economic cost is almost unimaginable. So if we are serious about tackling climate change, we have no option but to decarbonize the energy sector that accounts for 2/3 of global emissions. Earlier this year, in the context of the German presidency of the G20, we launched a study on the decarbonization of the energy sector with the well below 2 degrees centigrade target of the Paris Agreement. The report finds that renewables and energy efficiency would meet the 90% of emissions reductions needed, and the share of renewables in the primary energy supply would rise to 65% by 2050, up from 15% today. We believe that this energy transition is not only technically feasible, we know that it is technically feasible, but it is also economically attractive as it will fuel economic growth and create new employment opportunities. Global GDP would be boosted in this scenario by around 0.8% in 2050, the equivalent of almost $19 trillion in increased economic activity between today and 2050. Renewable energy jobs in our scenario would reach 26 million from the 10 million they are now by 2050. And so we believe that renewables are both good for climate and good for growth, which is the key message that we bring to the climate community today based on these findings. Although most countries now recognize the importance of renewables for decarbonization efforts and reference them in their nationally determined contributions, our just released NDC report finds that around twice as much new renewable power capacity came online in 2015 and 2016 compared to the amount foreseen in the NDCs. The current review process of the NDCs provides an important opportunity for countries to revise these plans and raise their level of ambition. In this context, IRENA is establishing a new facility to provide strategic planning and technical support to all countries that are planning to raise their level of ambition, and we will work together to support you in really coming to a very comprehensive understanding of how renewable energy can play a major part in NDCs in the future. The strong business case for renewables and the climate imperative are strengthening the momentum of the energy transformation across the globe. With today's event, we wanted to bring together the leading actors in this energy transformation to explore the innovations, ideas, technology, and benefits of a global renewable energy-based transformation. We have an extraordinary group of leaders, visionaries, and actors in this transformation with us today. We will hear about the climate imperative for renewables in small island developing states, and we are particularly appreciative that this COP under the presidency of Fiji is putting a spotlight on the challenges facing the SIDS, where we are very active. We will also learn more about the rapidly growing renewable markets in developing and emerging economies from Africa to Argentina. We will then shift to the massive renewables upscale taking place in China. Visionary energy leaders from the country's public and private sector will share with us their experiences about the extraordinary developments that are taking place there. This is really, truly remarkable trends. Our Visionaries and Innovators segment will feature the cutting-edge technology and actions that can take the energy transformation to the next level, such as Bertrand Piccard, my friend who is here with us today, his solar impulse, and somebody probably none of you know who have come across a young Russian scientist working on perovskite cells at Moscow State University. This afternoon after lunch, Governor Jerry Brown will tell us about California's impressive record in renewables deployment and its plans for reaching 100% renewables by 2045. I'm sure he will say a lot more than just that, as you know him, but I'm delighted that he's joining us, but he's also been mentioned in a news article yesterday as a president of the Republic of California. So I don't know whether that is a signpost for the future, but we'll see. The Lord Mayor of Bonn, Ashok Alexander Sridharan, will then highlight the ways that renewables are poised to transform COP23's host city. Corporate leaders from some of the world's most well-known energy and technology companies will then discuss why they are increasingly turning to renewables to power their operations and diversify their businesses. And our final segment of the day, we look at the ways that action by subnational actors like mayors are driving renewable energy deployment in cities and communities around the world at scales that we had not foreseen. So, ladies and gentlemen, the global surge of renewables is not just about the replacement of one energy source with another, but about an energy transformation that is reshaping the way energy is produced, distributed, and consumed with a more decentralized and democratic energy system that is emerging. The pace of change is accelerating, as we are seeing in areas such as digitization, storage, and sustainable transportation. This energy transformation is fostering new opportunities for boosting economic growth, creating jobs, enhancing energy access and energy security, and achieving sustainable development. With this energy transformation, we can realize climate and energy objectives in tandem while growing our economies and driving international cooperation. This is a remarkable opportunity that the international community has in its hands today, which is dramatically different from the past. So we must seize this opportunity, and at IRENA, we are ready to work with all of you to make this sustainable energy future a reality. I believe that more and more people have come to understand the imperative of change, the dynamic and logic of change that is taking place, and we are moving to a sustainable future. The question for us is, how do we accelerate this momentum so that we can remain in safe limits by the time we get there? So welcome, thank you very much. Looking forward to the discussions of the day. But let me start by introducing our first panel. We have a very, very interesting and very diverse panel with a number of very interesting perspectives. Let me first ask Amani Abu Zaid, the African Union Commissioner for Energy and Infrastructure. Amani, if you can join us. Amani has Amani has been appointed fairly recently, but she's already making a big impact. She has a very distinguished record in international organizations, in the African Development Bank, in the UN, and she is bringing a unique energy to the transformation of the African energy scene and the growth of infrastructure that will be, we hope, transformative and support the continued growth of Africa that we're seeing. So welcome, Amani. Let me also welcome my dear friend, Rainer Backe. Rainer Backe is the State Secretary and Federal Minister for Economic Affairs and Energy in Germany. I was asking Rainer this morning if my adjective for him was the right one, because I called him the shepherd of the Energiewende. There are a lot of sheep which needed to be herded in the right direction, and he's done an extraordinary job in achieving that. So welcome, Rainer. We also have my good friend Sebastian Kind. Sebastian is the Undersecretary General for Renewables from the Ministry of Energy of Argentina, and welcome, Sebastian. It is remarkable how, in a very short period of time, Argentina has transformed its energy strategy. Sebastian is the author of the Renewable Energy Law in Argentina, and the prices that they're getting in the new auctions are truly inspiring. And what you have done to shepherd this transition is an extraordinary thing. So welcome. We're very pleased to have you. But finally, for the panel, but to make a quick scene-setting presentation before we start our discussion, I'm absolutely delighted to have Kingsmill Bond, who is the new energy analyst for Trusted Sources Lombard in London. Trusted Sources is a very well-known financial services advisory company. We know that part of the challenge in the energy transformation is going to be the perception in the world of finance. And Kingsmill Bond is now the James Bond of renewable energy. He is going to give you a sense of the scale and the need and the speed of this transformation in his presentation, and then he will join us for the panel. So Kingsmill, welcome.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm not quite sure I can live up to being the Kingsmill Bond of the energy transformation, but I should try my best. I'm here to set the scene, as it were. I work in the financial services sector. I'm a financial strategist. I've been advising investors on what to do with their investments all across the world for 20 or 30 years. And this transformation is by far the most extraordinary, powerful, and interesting driver that I've seen in my career. So it will quite clearly transform not merely financial markets, but also geopolitics. And I'm here, I think, to make two arguments. First of all, that this transition will not be, as the naysayers say, slow, gentle, and distant. It will be fast, dramatic, and soon. And secondly, to say that the year 2020 will be the beginning of the end of the age of fossil fuels. We're 3 years away from this extraordinary moment. So I'm going to try and avoid very, very detailed charts and forecasts, because people who try and forecast complexity 30 years hence are deluding themselves. You only have to look 10 years ago to the way the world was and the way the world is today to realize that you can't possibly forecast 30 years. But I think you can look forward and get a sense, a historical sense of what's going on. And what is going on quite clearly is that the world is switching from fossil fuels to renewables. So this little green, or that large green mass on the right-hand side. And actually, it's not the first time that we've seen this transformation, this type of transformation. After 1800, the world switched from biomass to fossil fuels. And that was an absolutely transformatory shift. So it increased global energy use 60-fold in 200 years. The average German today uses, I think, 10,000 times as much light as they did 200 years ago. And this is a structural shift, not a cyclical shift, and I'll come on to why that matters in a moment. And then I think the other important introductory point to be made is that energy is a foundation technology. Everything else rests on the foundation of energy. So if energy changes, you should expect many other changes to take place right across the economy. So my second slide is very simple. It's a very simple observation. We think about this all the time in financial markets. And the point simply is that markets are driven by incremental change, not by size. So nobody cares that you make 990 widgets out of 1,000 widgets. If next year you're going to make 980 widgets, they're always focused upon change. So in these two graphs, on the graph on the left, I've shown just on the red line, demand in units, and in the blue line, you have the challenging new technology. And it looks like the change is very, very slow. That's when you look at the total. But I've shown exactly the same data in the chart on the right when you look at incremental demand. And of course, you see two things. First of all, that the incremental demand, the additional demand, the crossover point is much, much sooner. So in this little chart, it's 2020, surprisingly enough. And then you also see that the old technology very quickly goes into massive reversal and starts losing market share, also here in 2020. So markets are interested in questions like, when does growth stop and who gets the new growth? And the reason this matters is because when demand stops growing, you get stranded assets, you get bankruptcies, you get radical sector restructuring, and losers become apparent much more rapidly than winners. And the classic example that people always talk about is a Nokia, and they talk about Kodak and the Kodak moment. But actually, if you look back throughout energy history, you see this taking place right across energy history. So look at the canal shares in the United Kingdom in the 19th century, or look at railway shares, or look at investors in gas distribution businesses at the start of the 20th century. They all got wiped out by these transformations very, very quickly. My third point is to say that incremental change is very quick and very early, and it's especially powerful at times of cyclical change. So by definition, it strikes when the old industry is at its peak and when the challenging technology is small and widely dismissed. So I'm sure many people in this room have heard the argument of the oil industry that renewables are very small and solar plus wind is 2% or 2.5% of the total energy mix, and how tiny and irrelevant that is. Well, I've got some excellent ammunition to show why this argument is completely bogus and incorrect. So the best example, actually, is the European electricity sector. The European demand for thermal fossil fuels peaked in Europe in 2008, when solar and wind were just 3% of the total. And this 3% numbers are not irrelevant one. It's exactly the same number as happened in the transformations at the start of the 20th century in the United Kingdom, when the UK moved from coal and gas to oil and electricity. The old technology peaked and stopped growing, started to decline, when the new technology was just 2 to 3% of the total. You might wonder why you haven't heard this argument very much. Why doesn't the IEA make this argument? Why don't BP, why doesn't Exxon, why don't they think about this? Why don't they tell you what's really going on? And the answer is the same as we've always seen, which is that incumbents don't see change coming until it's too late. And even if they do see change coming, they deny it. My fourth point is that we are actually surrounded today by tipping points. But people often say to me, when is this mythical tipping point going to come? When will the change happen? And the answer is we're surrounded today by tipping points. So US oil demand peaked in 2005. OECD energy demand peaked in 2007. Global coal demand peaked in 2013. And I think most forecasters were still in 2015 telling us that global coal demand was going to carry on rising. Global per capita energy demand peaked in 2013, which I think is an incredibly important transition moment. Now, if I start to look forward and put my financial hat on, actually, global demand for thermal energy, for electricity, will peak next year. Next year. Global demand for all fossil fuels will peak in 2020, in 3 years' time. If you look at any of the data from the oil sector, these turning points are not going to happen for 30 years. And I can assure you it's 3 years ahead. You only have to make two assumptions to get to this 2020 number. First of all, that global energy demand grows at 1%, seems reasonable. Secondly, that solar and wind continue to grow for the next 3 years at 20%, also in the light of what China's doing right now, that also seemed incredibly reasonable. Add those two numbers up, and the tipping point is coming very, very shortly. At that moment, fossil fuels will make up 83% of global energy supply, and solar and wind will make up just 4%. But that is nevertheless the tipping point. My final observation, if I may, is that change, as Dr. Amin has said, is relentless. And I realize that I'm in a room of far greater experts than myself, so I shall just quickly give you perhaps a sense of the difference between the global energy transformation going on now and what happened last time round. So, first of all, this is a global transformation. Renewables, by definition, are global. The technology is global. Secondly, you have technology experience curves, as we all know, driving down the cost of solar and wind and batteries. Thirdly, regulation is driven not just by the desire to reduce carbon, but also by local concerns about pollution and energy security. And I'd like to make one specific point here. As the costs of renewables fall, so regulators will be emboldened to make fossil fuel companies pay for their externalities. So we all spend many hours adding up the policy decisions which are being made. Actually, with all due respect to some brilliant policymakers in this room, I think policymakers are going to be following technology, and therefore you should imagine that policy and the COP commitments will also follow the technological innovations which are taking place. Furthermore, the emerging market energy leapfrog is completely different to what we saw 200 years ago or previously. So China, India, Southeast Asia, Africa cannot and will not follow Western patterns of fossil fuel consumption. They are taking their own path, they will take their own path, and that will lead to a very, very different conclusion. And then the final point I'll make is, and it's often forgotten, but thanks to the incredibly hard work done on improving efficiency, the hurdle rate to create tipping points is much lower than it used to be. So during the last century, energy demand grew every year globally at 3%. At the moment, it's growing at 1%. So your hurdle rate to radical transformatory change is much, much lower. Right, I've come to the end of my framework, and I just really want to conclude now with what does this mean for financial markets? And I believe it's, as I said at the very start, absolutely transformatory. Financial capital will flee areas of decline. As people realize that the peak is coming, they will get out. Look at what happened to the coal sector. Peabody went bust a year and a half after global coal demand peaked. The European electricity sector wrote off $700 billion in the last 10 years, euros I should say, because they failed to see what was going on. So financial capital will flee the areas of decline. It's worth possibly arguing that fossil fuel company dividends are untaxed pollution. Think about that, because it creates a very different dynamic to thinking about those dividends. Secondly, financial resources will flood into the areas of growth. Where you get high energy return on investment of renewables, that will drive a new golden age of innovation, again, as Dr. Amin has said, and I think DHL, the investment of DHL into electric vans that I was hearing about last night is another good example of the transformatory nature of this opportunity which is being created. This will then drive a powerful self-reinforcing dynamic which will speed up the transition. And I guess I'm here to say that capital, or at least smart capital, is on the side of those who wish to create change. Furthermore, I would argue that even the United States will have its Sputnik moment. So if you recall, the United States was being beaten by Russia in the 1950s, and they suddenly woke up and thought, gee, the Russians had launched a Sputnik, we better have a space program. I suspect that regardless of who their leader is, they will wake up and realize that they're being leapfrogged by China, and they will have to have a very rapid shift into new energy technologies. So to conclude, not to say this will be easy. The embedded capital losses are huge, the vested interests are very powerful, regulators will have to be very clever, entrepreneurs will need to be bold, But my final point is that I think we have history on our side and we should be confident of success. Thank you.
Excellent, Kingsmill. Thank you so much. And let me say, if anybody's still owning stocks in fossil fuel companies, please call your broker as quickly as possible. You have time still. But I think that your presentation actually gives a lot of the substance to the sense that the energy transformation is going to be much quicker than we anticipated. And I remember when we started IRENA, and Rainer will remember this, we made a conscious decision to start talking about the technology and the business case for renewables, not about climate. The climate discussion had become so politicized, it was going to be inevitable that if we linked renewables and climate uniquely, then there would be a lot of kind of politicization of this discussion. We wanted this discussion to be an economics and business and technology discussion showing what is possible and how lives can be better in the future. And I think that you have demonstrated that, but now is the time to really create this message that this transformation is going to be the way that we decarbonize our societies in the future. There is no alternative. And what you have said, and many of our participants are going to say, this is happening. It is inevitable, but how do we speed it up? You say it's going to happen anyway, but we need it to happen very quickly. So we have a wonderful panel of policymakers who have been in this field for a long time, pushing the envelope, trying to make change, finally succeeding to be in high positions where they can actually drive this change. So I'm delighted to welcome them all. And I want to start with Amani Abu Zaid, the Commissioner for the African Union. Amani, in a short time, has become a good friend. She has an extremely exciting job, which is African Union Energy and Infrastructure Commissioner. It is a time of hope in Africa. We're seeing a period of growth. We're seeing some of the fastest growing economies in terms of growth rates being in Africa. African markets are transforming, but the energy issue still remains a key question mark. And there are many initiatives out there. We have the African Renewable Energy Initiative that was launched a couple of years ago, still getting started. We have the African Clean Energy Corridors, which we have been working on together, which is to create clean energy regulated markets throughout Africa based on the huge resources that Africa has. So Amani, where do you think this transformation is going to start to happen in Africa? Do you already see elements of it happening? How do you think it's going to unfold, and how do you think the international community should support this?
Thank you very much, Adnan, for the opportunity to talk about this very important topic here today. But let me first start by thanking our host, Germany in general and DHL in particular, to host this very important event, the COP23. It's rare to find the global scene an opportunity to meet with all these great and very important players and stakeholders. Regarding Africa, as you rightly said, Africa has its moment, and the moment is now. Not the future, but it's now. We're very much excited and we're happy about this. We've been seeing almost over 2 decades now of positive growth across the continent. Our markets are growing, our middle class is growing. The rate of urbanization is the highest in the world. It's the youngest continent and will continue to grow. As much as this is exciting, it's also the challenge. Our energy needs we must see an increase of 5-fold what we're seeing now in order to meet the access for all target. It is important to mention that 43% of our energy consumed on the continent is still biofuel. And this has to change. Now that we've seen great progress in China, definitely, and in India recently, now the focus is on Africa. You did mention some initiatives we're working on, the renewable energy. The PIDA program, the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, has already 29 renewable energy projects identified for the short and medium term. Of course, the potential for renewables in Africa is immense and huge. I'm not either, to be honest, we're not either discarding some of the sources like gas, which is still one of the cleanest forms of fossil. So we're also working on the energy mix in that sense. Now, where we see the challenges, one of them you just mentioned. It is so exciting that we're seeing mushrooming of initiatives on renewable energy. So the coordination of all this is a big challenge for us at the African Union. The second aspect, because we are keen on also in attracting investments, both domestic African investments, but also foreign, the climate change for investments still remains in some countries challenging. That said, we have more than 5 African countries in the top 100 countries ranked, in the Doing Business report that was published recently. But we have a very ambitious project for the geothermal energy, which has been implemented since 2 or 3 years now in East Africa, with the help of many friends. But the real excitement comes from what are the elements that came in the presentation is that Africa, we're not following the path of Europe. It's no longer a linear development path. It's rather leapfrogging, and we're seeing exciting models off-grid solar solutions paid for by mobile banking developed in Africa for Africa and the world. So we're seeing also a different type of a business model in the energy sector taking place in Africa, and we have the huge advantage of not having to follow an already set path by someone else. So I don't call it disruptive technology as they call it maybe in all continents. We call it technology simply because for us it was a gap, and we're filling it with the latest in terms of technology. Now, one of the other aspects that I must also emphasize is the aspect of the private sector collaboration and the harmonization of policies and the pricing. When we talk about harmonization of policies, when we talk about pricing, when we talk about the attracting investments, so far most of our countries have been talking at the political level, not very much including the private sector in the policy setting or the pricing setting. And this is what we're trying to change as well. We're trying to bring in together, all the stakeholders in order to get it right for everybody. I think I'll stop here and then maybe take some other questions.
Thanks, Amani. It's indeed a very exciting time in Africa. The potential is huge, but the risks are also huge. And what we have to do, and we'll come back to that discussion in the course of the panel. But let me now turn to Sebastian Kidd. Sebastian is Undersecretary for Energy, as I mentioned in my introduction. And it is truly remarkable to us in what a short period of time that we've achieved a turnaround both in terms of economic development as well as energy transformation under the current government in Argentina. It's truly inspiring to see how this is happening. But in the area of energy, we WhatsApp together, and I always wait to wake up in the morning because of our time difference to see what new price he got. It's remarkable. It seems to be lower and lower every week. But they have innovated around auctions. They have reduced the price. They have created new dynamic in the market. But they have also declared this year as the year of renewable energy in Argentina. And I think for whole of Latin America, we have a new dawn of energy. So Sebastian, over to you, and just tell us a little bit about the experience you've had and why you think this is going to move so quickly as you do.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting me. It is really a pleasure to stay here. I'm extremely grateful. And thank you, DHL, also for giving us this opportunity to stay here in the building. Yeah, as you said before, Anand, it is quite interesting what is going on in Argentina this year and the year before. As soon as we took office last year, we started with the implementation of something that was really important, that was the Renewable Energy Law, something that I worked for the Senate. And the interesting was to shift to really change the way of doing the things. I mean, you know that Argentina was a very hostile investment environment, and in the eyes of many of the observers, it was absolutely crazy to think in the long term for structuring renewables. And 20 years PPA means 5 administrations. 5 administrations in a developing country. That was, for many of the investment, of the members of the investment community, a crazy idea. And we understood that we had to do something in order to change this. And of course, the macroeconomic environment is something that must help us, but we needed to do something in concrete in order to change this and to structure long-term infrastructure projects in a difficult investment environment. So how to foster the investment appetite, the investment community, was part of the Renovar program, which is the name of the program that we structured last year in the country. So first of all, we started with a national law, a legal framework, a full legal framework. Argentina didn't have a legal framework for renewable energy. So we started with a national law that was passed by and enacted at the end of 2015, so 2 years ago. The most interesting part within the law is that we passed by almost by unanimity in the Congress. And that's critical because 4 or 5 administrations that you have to go through means that you need political support from all the parties involved, not only from the one that is in the government. So we have to understand that we have to create a state policy rather than a government policy, because that's the only way to structure long-term in countries where the history is not with us. So 94% of the Congress voted in favor, and we were 3 weeks before the presidential elections, and you know what that means. Everybody is saying yes, because nobody wants to say no to renewables. So it's a matter of how to structure this, even in a difficult political environment, and we did it. That's the first. The second is that we put in place the regulatory decree that makes operative the law, and that was really fast. I mean, the minister asked me to do it in less than a month. So we really worked on Christmas last year, the year before, and we put a quite interesting document in place in the desk of the president of the country. We signed this at the beginning of last year, and we start rolling the game. So basically, in the regulatory decree, what we structure is we define 2 ways for contracting renewables in the country. One is through purchases from the federal government, and the other is that we created a market for large consumers to straight sign their own PPAs. The third stage of this chain, the third link of this chain is the Renovar program as a whole. Renovar has a lot of interesting things, and perhaps the most interesting thing is the way we structure a set of warranties. So we shield the program from the country risk. We took it out from the country risk and we put it in the capital market. So that was perhaps the key element of Renovar and the success behind Renovar. I mean, Renovar first auction, we offer 1,000 megawatt and we received more than 6 times oversubscription. That was last year, and in only 5 months, as soon as we took office, this year we launched the second auction, 1.2 thousand megawatt, and we received more than 8 times oversubscription, more than 9,400 megawatt of firm commitment, with warranties behind. With players from all over the world, from Europe, from the States, from the same Latin America, from Asia, from all over the world. So what happened? We structured a quite interesting set of warranties. We brought the World Bank in the third stage. we mitigate the risks, we shield the program from the Argentinian risk, and we put it in the capital market. And it's working. Today we have 27 projects under construction, which is quite impressive. I mean, we flooded the roads with blades, with solar panels, with things that never happened in Argentina before. So we are really changing the mix. And we know that this is absolutely feasible. More than half of the population on Earth is facing the same problem, and it is absolutely feasible. Prices are really amazing. I mean, we obtained prices in the range last year, in the range of $45 to $55 megawatt hour, and we are about to open envelopes for the second auction next week. And we know that we're going to start in less than $40 megawatt hour. So it's working.
Amazing, amazing. And I see Zhangli is smiling because he won one of those bids in Argentina. But I think, you know, what this shows is that the transformation that Kingsmill presented to us is happening. It's going to happen at scale. And the winners in this are going to be the ones who get the mix of policy, legislation, risk mitigation, financial structuring right. And it's going to move much faster than anybody anticipated. So we'll come back to that issue, but let me come to Rainer. It's wonderful to be with Rainer. We've been together for some years now while I've been at ARENA, and it's been really inspiring to see as you move much further in the energy transformation and you are a leader, you run into headwinds that others will not experience because you are actually forging the path. And Germany has been doing that. Rainer has been, you know, for his entire energy career, I think, really dedicated to this issue. And you've had remarkable progress, but you've also had a lot of problems. But Rainer, as you look at your Energiewende experience and listening to what's been said on the panel, where do you see yourself going now? Are you going to still have the level of ambition that you were talking about? And what are the global implications of this, of the path that Germany is taking?
Well, first of all, I think we have seen an incredible development in the last decade and a half, and I'm absolutely convinced that this global energy transition cannot be stopped by anybody anymore. And Kingsmill and you and everybody else gave the good reasons for that. However, I'm not sure whether this speed of the transformation will be enough to meet our Paris targets. Yeah? Tuesday, Wednesday of this week, I was in Paris. It was the annual ministers' meeting of the International Energy Agency. And I heard not only from many industrialized countries, but also especially from China and India, what incredible amounts of solar and wind they're going to invest in the next years. I mean, our countries are important, but when it comes to numbers, China and India are a different category. That was the one hand. On the other hand, there was a meeting with the 25 biggest oil and gas companies of the world, the CEOs, and I heard about their investment plans. And you know, it will be very interesting to see whether your forecast is going to be right or their forecasts are going to be right. So, and this debate, of course, we have in every country right now. The debate has completely shifted to the times when we discussed the Kyoto Protocol. At that time, renewable energies, they were an expensive luxury that only rich countries like Germany could afford. Today, it's exactly the other way around. It's exactly the other way around. However, we still see investments into fossil technologies. And when I talk about fossil technologies, I'm not only talking about the power sector. For example, here in Europe, I agree, there's hardly any coal generator built anymore. Around the world, it's a little bit different, but let's look at the other sectors. We do not only use oil, coal, and gas in the power sector. We drive our cars with gasoline and diesel. we heat our houses with oil and with natural gas. That's all fossil technologies. So these investments, for example, if you build a building and you do not build it with the right efficiency standards where you can heat it maybe with a heat pump, CO2 free in the future, you create fossil structures that are going to be there for 80 to 100 years. And what about the car industry? You know, the cars that we put on the road in 2030 with a lifespan of 20 years means that still in 2050, we're going to drive with diesel and gasoline. So the power sector, on the one hand, right now, is responsible for the biggest shares of CO2 emissions. In this country, it's around 40%. But it's also the key for the solution. Because if we talk about this transformation, not only with view to the power sector, but to our entire economy, you know, just imagine a future world where you will not heat your house any longer with oil or with natural gas. Imagine a world where you will not drive with diesel and with gasoline. Imagine a world where the electricity that you use with your computer, your lighting, will not come from fossil technologies anymore. It's going to be a much more modern world. And the power sector is absolutely going to be key. There are two elements for this transformation that we really have to focus on. That's efficiency. Without efficiency, we're not going to meet these targets. And the second is renewable energies. And the power sector will supply that energy need in the mobility sector, in the industrial sector, in the heating sector that we cannot save through energy efficiency, that we cannot substitute through direct use of renewables. The rest of the energy will come from the power sector, because in the power sector we have learned how to produce energy CO2-free, mainly with wind, solar, and hydro. So the power sector today is a huge part of the problem, but it is also the key solution. And the interesting debate is, indeed, is this going to be a process now, Kingsmill, that is just going to happen by itself because the investments are going to shift from the losers to the winners? Or is this going to be a process that will last too long? Because we only have this budget of less than 1,000 gigatons of CO2 left. 1,000 gigatons in form of oil, coal, and gas. And we're very proud that over the last 3 years we have not increased the global annual emissions, but if we stay at that level, the budget will be gone in 35 years. And then we are in a world beyond 2 degrees Celsius. So are we going to be able to really bend this curve quick enough, expand this budget, and then use this century to move over to a decarbonized world? That is the key question. And I'm not sure whether I should be optimistic that we're going to do that. It still will be a huge fight.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's very sobering, but we know as a policymaker, you always look at the downside, but there's an upside because you were at the IEA and you must have noticed that over the last 15 years, IEA projections on renewables have been dramatically underestimating renewables. So maybe that's a reliable indicator that things are better than we see. And the other is that, how quickly things are changing. One of the countries, we deal with a lot of countries that are very excited about renewables and looking at the future energy transformation as a major opportunity. But there are hydrocarbon producers who are vested in the past. But look at the Middle East. In the UAE where we are, what you're getting in terms of investment in renewables, low prices, and future transformation is dramatic. Saudi Arabia has started to move in this direction. I was in the launch of their renewables initiative, 9.5 gigawatts to start. But the recent investment forum where I also attended, they're adding 3 gigawatts a year to that over the next 3 or 4 years. So dramatic changes are happening. I think the cost reduction potential will continue. I was invited for the first time to the Russian Energy Week, and I was told I'm going to be on a panel, and I was completely taken by surprise because the first panel had President Putin on it, together with the Secretary General of OPEC and the Secretary General of the gas-producing countries, and me. I was, you know, and
Something wrong.
yeah. So, I mean, there are signs that this is happening, and I put forward my argument. Of course, all of them immediately became nervous and started saying, no, there are 3 more decades, but they're not. Any rational person who sees the developments of technology in the market knows this is going to change. And the Russians also know it. And we're going to talk to a young scientist, Alexei, here, about what is happening in the Russian Federation, which is, you know, they have massive scientific and technological capability, which they're now applying to this. So, but Kingsmill, you know, I think this is a question in everybody's mind after we listen to the panel and we think about your presentation and what the future is going to look like. So I think the issue that Rainer raised is the critical one. How's this going to happen? How's the scale and the speed of this? Do you see this as an autonomous thing that is happening? Or do we need enlightened policymakers like Rainer, like Amani, like Sebastian, who need to put in the right frameworks at the country level? And what is the role of finance in all of this?
Well, I believe, that, as I said in my presentation, the resistance is very powerful. So definitely you need excellent policymakers in order to make this happen. But I guess if 10 years ago financial markets were not at all interested in this, or interested only insofar as they could milk the free money, now, increasingly, as this tipping points are reached, they can see the opportunity to build very significant businesses, and they can also see the risk of stranded assets. So I guess it's a bit of a shift that's happened in the financial sector. I think possibly you need to think of this in terms of 2 issues. One is, when does fossil fuel demand itself peak and start to decline? And then the second issue is, can we hit this carbon budget? My analysis has been all about this first one. But what I think will happen is, as we get over these tipping points and start moving down the other side, you will be surprised by how quickly people will stop wanting to build and own fossil fuel assets. So, for example, I live in Oxford, and the local government in Oxford has just banned the use of fossil fuel cars in the centre of the city after 2020. So people living in Oxford are already thinking, crikey, do I want to buy myself a fossil fuel car? And furthermore, the market in second-hand fossil fuel cars is going to be damaged. So I use that as a sort of very small anecdotal example to say that it's very, very hard for us to forecast the second and third round consequences of the type of tipping points that I guess I'm describing. But certainly I think you're right. You do need brilliant policymakers such as yourself. And it's not going to be easy, I understand that.
Yeah, but this is not a game for the faint-hearted. And this is a room full of people who know that this is going to happen. And this is the momentum that we have to create through these conversations is how do we take it there. Good, so let's have a couple of very quick questions. Coming back to you, Amani, I'm also from Africa like you. And one of the things that really worries me is how are we going to make the right choices today? And we've worked together on some of these initiatives for the clean energy corridors and the African renewable energy. But at the same time, we have coal, we have gas, new discoveries, we have oil. How are African governments going to make the right decisions about their energy future today based on their massive renewable resources that we know exist and which are already being harvested? How do we work together to take Africa in the right direction? What are the key elements of a strategy that needs transformation in Africa?
I think you mentioned 1 or 2 elements already earlier in your earlier comment. I mean, African governments are also aware of the economics of renewables, among other things. So we are not completely unaware of what's happening around us. The economics are compelling. The prices of oil are falling dramatically, and our countries are very much aware of the importance of not only diversification in general, the economic diversification, but specifically in the energy sectors. The appetite of investors to invest in Africa is very high. So our governments are also trying to seize the moment to implement these very ambitious projects and to meet our targets. You mentioned the Middle East and North Africa, but specifically in Africa, we have one of the most dependent countries on fossil fuel. Morocco, 98% dependent on fossil fuel, has changed this completely to become now one of the leading countries in terms of solar and about the Noor and the Warzazat power station, which I had the great privilege to implement when I was in Morocco. Egypt last week or 2 weeks ago, they signed again a huge complex for solar, the Benban. Sudan, same thing. Hydro is almost everywhere in the continent. So our continent is very much, and our leaders are very much aware of the importance of renewables and the potential that we have. The one thing I did mention, gas. Gas is true. I mean, gas is all the way from Egypt all the way to the East Africa, but also on the West is the huge resources. We cannot ignore that. Again, we need to really meet a huge demand and jump very high in order to meet the ambitions and the needs of the continent. I mentioned the energy mix, and we're not discarding gas, at least gas. Coal is dying by itself. I mean, I'm happy to say the economics of renewables are compelling. Now, what we need to do, you mentioned about what we need to do. One, the capacity, in terms of capacity development. One of the challenges, not only investment, but also the capacity to implement these ambitious programs. So the investing in the human element in the continent is very important. Two, because one of our targets in Africa is to link and to integrate the continent economically. The regional programs are very complex. In addition to the technical complexity of a national program, so the regional ones are even more complex. So this is another element, both technically and also in terms of harmonization and coordination. So we need to focus also on in addition to the human element, to also the harmonization of policies, which I mentioned earlier. So investments, capacity building, and harmonization and coordination are key for Africa to meet its targets and to benefit from the great attention that's been awarded to the continent as of now. One just point, if I may, because you mentioned it in your introduction. You said we were not focusing on climate change in our arguments when you started. I was very happy to, when the new energy outlook was launched a few weeks ago, the 2017, to mention that meeting access for all in Africa will not negatively affect climate change. So that was very important also to mention. So to know that when all Africans have access to energy, this is not going to negatively affect the emissions and climate change.
Certainly not. If you see the drivers of renewables in rural areas, the pay-as-you-go systems, the new innovations that are happening, that's where the action really is. But I would add to that maybe one issue that you still need to focus in Africa is infrastructure and the interconnections, development of grid infrastructure, the regulated market for electricity.
That's what I meant.
We have just signed, we are going to sign today an agreement with the chairman of the state grid to provide us with additional expertise to look at the infrastructure issues. So we're looking forward to working more closely with you on the Corridors Initiative to really start to move this. So, but you mentioned the leaders. I met with President Sisi in December last year when we started our assessment for Egypt. I was surprised that, I met the president of Egypt, but it became very clear to me why that meeting took place, because he wanted to impress on me that the issue with renewables was not only clean electricity. He said we have 1 million young people join the workforce of Egypt every year. Mm-hmm. If we don't find them jobs, our entire model of governance is unsustainable. Our country will be destabilized. We need to find new areas of growth, and he really sees renewables as one of those. In fact, I have to go back to inform him of the results of the assessment soon. So these are the co-benefits issues. And Sebastian, let me come to you on this, because you're also in an important emerging economy. The issue is not just renewable power. It's not just renewable electricity in the system. What are you doing in terms of the local content part, the local value chain? is this driving decision making, and where do you see the benefits coming? Because we see a net economic benefit from this.
Yeah, what we've done is that we designed a mechanism in which we are not obliging the sponsors and the offerers to buy local technology, but there is an incentive put in place for them to play the local game. So, of course, everybody can play an international game, can bring technology from abroad, but we are giving a rewarding system. We put in place a rewarding system for those players that want to play a local content game. So basically, there is a fiscal certificate, which is an incentive for the sponsors to trigger, to pull from the local manufacturers. We invite all of the international manufacturers to manufacture locally. And we are seeing the results in this second auction. It is pretty amazing the way and the approach of the international sponsors to provide technology from local facilities. So that's something that is working, and in 1 week we're going to see final results of that, but it's working.
Great. Rainer, we don't have much time left, but reflecting on all of what has been said here, and with the vast experience you have in the Energiewende process, what do you think are the key issues that we have to address? Government policymakers, international organizations, private sector firms, where's the change going to happen? Because we talked about the power sector. What we're seeing from our perspective is that the global power sector capacity addition, every year the majority is from renewables today. And if you look at Kingsmill's scenario of 20%, I think we're there. So power sector is actually happening. I think the issue with the power sector is going to be, and our next panel on China is going to go into this, what is the infrastructure that's going to support it? And how do we deal with data and technology in making this transformation a reality? But everything is coming together. It's the end-use sectors. And you know, Germany is the home of Mercedes and BMW. I think we buy most of them in China and the UAE. But how do you see the end-use sectors? Where are the levers of change for mobility? Do you think mobility is going to come quickly? Because indications seem to be yes. Heating, cooling, industrial uses. How are we going to do this? Because that's the issue we identified in the German report we did together.
Well, I think we're going through various phases of this energy transition. The first one was all about developing the technologies. We have learned which technologies work here in this country. Luckily, prices came down, so this is a process that I don't worry about anymore. The second question that arose from there, once you have a share of about 25% renewables in the system, and most of that is wind and solar, how do you integrate them into the system? How do you make the entire system work efficiently? You cannot have two systems. You need one integrated system. You have to make sure that security questions are addressed and price questions are addressed. I think we have also, at least here in this country, found the basic answers for that. It's not all implemented yet. The grid expansion still has to happen, but the design is there. I think the answers have been given. What is going to happen now is exactly what you just said. How are we going to meet the Paris targets, which require a complete decarbonization during the turn of the century in all the different sectors for the end users? And I think that this whole idea of energy transition has not really arrived yet in the mobility sector. It has not arrived in the heating sector when it comes to housing. There has not been much progress, also not in this country here. The emissions in the transport sector have not gone down. Our overall emissions have been reduced 28% since 1990. In the mobility sector, there is a slight increase of 2%. So this is exactly the debate that we need now. Fossil emissions do not only result from the power sector, they come from all the different sectors. And what the German government did last November, we we have targets, intermediate targets, not only for 2050, but 20, 30, 40. And for 2030, for the first time, we set targets for the various sectors, sector targets. So now it is very clear which sector has to do what and what is on the agenda. Now, we just had elections and the negotiations now over a new government. And one of the key jobs of the new government is going to be to develop a strategy for reducing the emissions in these various sectors. And I'm absolutely key. We're going to find these two elements that I mentioned before. Without a significant increase in efficiency, it's not going to work. And the end energy is going to come from the power sector, from renewable sources, because they can produce that electricity without CO2. But it's a big transformation, and it will take probably several decades, simply because these investment cycles are so long. I talked about the buildings. Yeah? Last year we had a debate in this country here, 1 billion refugees, they all need houses, we need to lower our building standards. I mean, we are building these houses for 80 to 100 years. Yeah? And if we do not build them with efficiency standards, that in the future they will not be able to rely on oil heaters or natural gas heaters, we are creating lock-in effects. Yeah? Possibly stranded investments, I'm not so sure about that. It's probably just going to be, because these houses are not going to be abandoned. They probably will require a lot of private and a lot of federal money to later bring them into a position where they can meet these targets. It's just going to be all more expensive. And look at the debate that we have in our mobility sector with the car industry now. I am very much concerned that what happened in the power sector might repeat itself in the mobility sector, in that sense that some of the big players, also in this country here, missed the train. Yeah? And then the shareholder value really has dropped. If you look at the big 4 companies here in Germany that dominated 90% of the market, they believed in the old technologies. Exactly that what Kingsmill put on the screen there happened. That's true. Something like that could happen to our car industry as well.
Yes.
Yeah? With one big difference, because here in this country, in the power sector, because power you cannot put on a ship or on a train and transport it to another continent, so there was new business models came up here with German and other companies that invested here. But there is no law that says good cars have to be built in Germany. So if our car industry misses that train, at some point it really might risk, the livelihood of one of our most important industries that we have here. And we have to prevent that. Exactly. This is a responsibility of the CEOs, but it's also a responsibility of the politicians. There has to be a very clear understanding that this transformation has to happen now, and then we have to talk about how we're going to make it. Otherwise, also economies like the German economy would really suffer in the future.
Well, this is exactly the thing. Is there complacency? And one thing is the plans of decision makers in the private and public sector today making bets about the long-term future, and the other is the logic of the market. If you remember what happened to your utilities here, they lost tens of billions of dollars in market capitalization in 1 year because they missed the boat. So I think the specter of stranded assets is a real one. And I think people are beginning to feel this, but there's no logical responses yet for how we're going to deal with it. Remember that you forced us to do a report with IEA? The big fight was over what the stranded assets are going to be, and we had to be a little diplomatic on that, but there are going to be stranded assets. Last word, Kingsmill, and we have a minute.
I think my last word is the good analogy to think about this energy transformation is thinking about the education of a child. If you'll forgive me, bear with me for a moment, because a lot of the objections and a lot of the problems people are talking about, and they say, well, this child aged 4 can't do differential mathematics, they can't solve complex problems in chemistry, but actually the transformation comes throughout the child's life, and as they, we're maybe at age of 5 or 6 now, and actually at the age of 10, a radical shift will happen. and we don't need to worry so much about the long-term problems and solve it, and then taking the final exam when they go to university. That's I think, the right framework to think about this transition.
Okay, thank you. Well, this is not the movie, so Bond doesn't get the last word. Sebastian does. Sebastian, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, no, just to follow your comment, when you said if it is possible to speed up the transition and to achieve the target and the goals, I mean, paradoxically, what is going on is that more than half of the population pays even more than twice the value, the cost of the electricity they could. And why is happening is because of the fact that in those countries it is very difficult to structure long-term infrastructure projects. I'm not talking about Europe, I'm not talking about the US, I'm not talking about Australia. Most of the rest of the countries are suffering about the lack of long-term infrastructure programs because of the fact that they cannot do, and the investment community does not trust on the long term. So it is absolutely possible to speed up that transition if we understand how to structure this long term, how to mitigate the risk, and how to shield these programs from the country risk, and we put it in the capital market in the long term. Mm-hmm. And more than of what I'm saying is what we've done, and it's working. And it's working at with amazing results, with amazing interest from all over the world, with amazing prices, in a very short time, in few months. So I know that this is absolutely feasible, but of course, more than half of the population, even 2/3 of the population, what we need is support from international community, support from international organizations. Otherwise, will not be possible to achieve, at least in the time we need.
Well, that's the perfect note to end, because I think, it's all about international cooperation. This is not one person can do everything on their own, and how do we create that framework is really our challenge, and I think that we have the beginnings of institutions and programs that can deliver this. But ladies and gentlemen, I think that's a perfect segue to our next panel, long-term infrastructure. So please join me in thanking an excellent discussion this morning. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Pleasure to meet you. My pleasure. Ciao. It was excellent. I mean, I look forward to learning more about your experience and eventually come here. Yes, yes, I will give you my card. As usual, outstanding. Thank you very much.
Let's settle down, because there are a lot of very interesting things coming now. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we can take our seats, please. This is the problem with renewable energy discussions. People get very excited. Okay, so please take your seats, and we are going to move to our next session, and I'm absolutely delighted that we are able to have two very special actors in this field with us today. We're going to focus on China, and over the last years, since I've been in this position, we've established a very special partnership with China. China is the world's biggest renewable energy market. The scale of investment and growth that is happening in China today is truly game-changing. I think in terms of what the implications for the world, both for carbon as well as for innovation and technology, China is leading many of these processes. And we think that, it is dramatic to see how a country goes in a few years from a narrative of high pollution and high carbon emission to a narrative of energy transformation that is moving faster than anywhere else that we see. So I'm delighted to have and to welcome, first of all, Dr. Shu-Yin Bao, Chairman of the China State Grid. The China State Grid serves only 1.1 billion people. It's the biggest utility in the world, perhaps the biggest company in the world, and it is really taking path-breaking initiatives to transform the energy sector of China. So Mr. Shu-Yin Bao will join me here, but he will give us a presentation in a couple of minutes. But I'm also especially delighted to have a wonderful entrepreneur, thinker, and visionary, Zhang Li, who's the CEO of Envision. Many of you probably have heard of Envision. And I was with Zhang Li and his team a few weeks ago in Hong Kong to discuss a new initiative called Entopia, which is the energy utopia. How do we move in this direction? We were together also, Thierry, there. And I think that what you are doing in terms of your generating assets, the future of digitalization, and how you're handling, integrating all of this variable energy and monitoring it in real time and managing energy demand in new ways is really one of the enabling activities that we're going to see in the energy transformation in the future. So let me start by asking His Excellency Shu-Yin Bao, Chairman State Grid, to make a presentation, then join me on the panel. Thank
you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my great pleasure to attend the COP23 Renewable Energy Day. I would like to take this opportunity to share my views and our practice on accelerating energy transition and renewable energy development. Electricity plays the key role in energy transition. Paris Agreement is irreversible, and we need to accelerate the world's transitions to low carbon and greater reliance on climate change. The extensive development of fossil energy is the main contributor for climate change. Therefore, to meet the global temperature control target set by the Paris Climate Conference, it is imperative for us to shut off the over-reliance on fossil energy, replacing coal and oil by clean electricity. As the largest utility in the world, State Grid Corporation of China takes construction and operation of power grids as a core business. Our mission is to deliver clean energy and facilitate sustainable development. In China, we provide power to over 1.1 billion people, in which 28% is generated from non-fossil energy. In overseas market, we have invested in energy networks in 7 countries, including Brazil, the Philippines, Italy, Portugal, Greece, Australia, and Austria, with more than 57 billion US dollars overseas assets. State Grid ranked the second place on Fortune Global 500 with 300 billion US dollars revenue in 2017. The energy transition in China. In recent years, Chinese government has been committed to pushing energy transition in terms of sustainable development to meet global target of carbon emission. Chinese President Xi Jinping recently pointed out in his report for the 19th National Congress of CPC Central Committee that China will speed up reform for promoting a sound economic structure and facilitates green, low carbon, and circular development. We will get actively involved in global governance, fulfill our commitments on emissions reduction, and build a beautiful China. Just the day before yesterday, at the 25th APEC CEO Summit, Chinese President Xi re-emphasized that the CO2 emission in China will hit the peak by 2030 or even earlier. The revolution in energy production and consumption had been raised to national strategy to promote a clean, efficient, and sustainable energy development. First, developing renewable energy. China will increase the share of renewable energy to significantly reduce the production capacity of coal and coal-fired power. In 2016 and 2017, China managed to reduce the production of coal by 440 million tons, with more than 50 gigawatts of coal-fired capacity being suspended or phased out. By the end of 2016, the non-fossil energy accounted for 13.3% of primary energy consumption. The target was set by 15% in 2020, 20% in 2030, and 50% by 2050. Second, advancing the re-electrification. China had been actively promoting the replacement of coal and oil by electricity in transportation, industry, and commerce, as well as household consumption. By the end of 2016, China had more than 1 million electric vehicles, accounting for half of the world total. In North China, electricity is gradually replacing the combustion of coal as a major source of heating. By the end of this year, coal-fired boilers will be replaced by electric ones in cities of China. During past 5 years, the installed capacity of clean energy grew from 26% to 36%. The clean energy generation was nearly 20% last year. This year, the energy consumption per unit of GDP is expected to reduce by over 3.4%. Third, promoting energy structural reform and technical innovation. China is deepening the reform by means of adopting a market-oriented approach and deregulated at the power generation and the sales side. China has also been vigorously promoting energy-related technological innovation through making major breakthroughs in renewable energy development, advanced nuclear power, ultra-high voltage, and smart grid, achieving many significant results. The practice of state grid. Based on China's condition, state grid has made major contributions to energy transition by building large power grid, employing large power bases, and embracing a large power market. First, developing the UHV transmission. With advantages of less land loss and land use, UHV technologies can economically and efficiently deliver large-scale electricity over long distance. Now we have put 16 UHV projects in operation, and another 6 UHV projects are under construction. By 2030, a total of 2,200 terawatt-hours electricity will be delivered through UHV transmission lines. The UHV projects enable large-scale power transmission from renewable energy bases in West China to local centers in East China, reducing coal combustion by 660 million tons. Globally, we are proud to construct the Belo Mountain hydropower UHV project in Brazil, delivering hydropower from Amazon region to load centers over 3,000 kilometers away. Second, making our grid smarter. State Grid has been dedicated to technical innovation. We have developed the world-leading dispatching and operation system. We have deployed 430 million smart meters in total, researched and constructed world-leading VSC HVDC transmission projects. The Smart Grid demonstration project in Zhangjiakou, North China, is the world's largest one, integrating technologies of wind, solar, storage, and transmission. Third, promoting the expansion of renewable energy. By the end of 2016, the installed capacity of renewables reached 600 gigawatt, in which wind 150 gigawatt, solar 80 gigawatt, both top of the world. Our grids have strong capacity to accommodate the renewables energy. For example, from June 17th to the 24th, Qinghai province, located in northwest China, was solely powered by renewable energy, 100% of renewable energy, for 7 days, 168 hours in total. Fourth, facilitating electricity replacement. State Grid also always spares no effort replacing coal and oil by clean electricity. From 2000 and 2016, the share of electrical power in end consumption increased from 11% to 22%, higher than the world average. This figure is expected to reach 24% by 2020. State Grid has built the world's largest highway fast charging system, covering 121 cities in 16 provinces to serve the development of EVs. Moreover, State Grid has established the world's largest smart internet of EVs with 165,000 charging posts, serving over 1 million EVs. We will also promote the construction of harbor power facilities along the eastern coasting. Fifth, helping precise policy design and the market mechanism. We help to precisely design power market mechanism to break trading barriers. Our power grid has been a unified, interconnected, smart, serving as a platform for renewable energy accommodation. Now I'd like to give 3 suggestions. Energy transition fundamentally changes the traditional energy system which will face many difficulties and challenges. Therefore, we need more international cooperation. Based on our practice, I would like to make the following suggestions, addressing first, to enhance infrastructure connectivity. Large renewable energy bases and load centers could be connected by means of UHV technologies. For example, people in Asia and Europe may enjoy the electricity from solar bases in Sahara through global energy interconnection. Second, innovation always plays a key role, and the cooperation makes it possible. Digital and energy revolution boost the development of renewable energy. As a result, we developed grid-friendly technology with a higher efficiency and low cost of the renewable generation. Third, the Belt and Road Initiative proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping has created a huge cooperation spaces. We are willing to cooperate with international counterparts, and we believe that in the future, renewable energy will draw greater attention and investment with more opportunities be offered. Ladies and gentlemen, the industry is ready to build an extensive and interconnected, smart and interactive, flexible and resilient, secure and controllable new power system. Thank you very much for your attention.
So what an inspiring vision. And I had the great honor to be hosted by you at the headquarters of the State Grid in Beijing. Yeah. And it was a really wonderful occasion. I mean, I was completely impressed. And you know, it's one of those wonderful stories where we are changing from the helplessness of the climate discussion, which is almost overpowering in the way that, you know, can we have solutions to carbon or not, what can we do, to seeing what is practically happening, and a giant economy like China turning so quickly. They said economies turn like supertankers. China is turning like a hot hatchback very quickly. So it's remarkable to see that and all the technologies, but you know, President Xi Jinping has talked about this as an energy revolution. Yeah. Now, in an energy revolution, a large company like the State Grid of China, what is the role of the State Grid in making a revolution happen?
Well, good question. Yes, Chinese President Xi Jinping pointed out in China we need to have a great revolution in energy production and consumption. Mm-hmm. As the world's largest utility, State Grid will actively participate the energy transition, the revolution. What we have been looking for to this transition, I think the State Grid will play the important role to make it happen. Yeah. First of all, we will further enhance the nationwide power networks, especially for the development, the interconnections between the west to the east. You know, China with its very unique characteristics for the resources location. Mm-hmm. That means the most renewables are located in the west part and the northwest part of the country. 80% of the hydropower is located in the southwest, mm-hmm. and the renewables are located in the northwest. So if we want to have energy transition by means of utilizing of the renewable energy. So we must exploit the renewables in the west part. But the load centers are in the coast area in the east. The distance between the two is over 3,000 kilometers. So we have to research and develop the very reliable and economic and efficient way to transport the power where it's generated to the power where to be consumed. So that we are going to do first. It's our first priority. Secondly, we will pay much attention or focus on our efforts, our investment for the innovation. No innovation, no the energy transition. So what we have been doing is to develop the smart grids. And we have been doing a lot of pilot projects. The third, the digitalization. That means we need a precisely market mechanism to facilitate the energy transition. And we will do many things towards the energy transition.
Well, thank you very much. And you know, it's really inspiring. When I was with you, I asked you about the smart grid and smart meters. You told me we only have 350 million. And I saw from your presentation it's now 460 million. Yeah. And your vision on the electric mobility integration as part of the state grid is also truly inspiring. Stay with me and let me ask Zhang Li, CEO of Envision. Zhang Li, are you going to speak to us from the lectern? So come and tell us about your experience, because I think that's another kind of path-breaking innovation that is happening in Envision in terms of digitalization and data management in your assets. So if you can share with us your experience.
Good morning, everyone. Why I mean digital energy revolution, I didn't say evolution, because what I strongly believe, evolution is beyond planning. Once that happens, it's going to be beyond our control. And why? Because I strongly believe today this revolution is from bottom up. Why I'm so optimistic than Rain regarding this energy revolution? Because I'm taking a different perspective, a bottom-up disruptions. If you see the disruption in the transportation business, in the telecommunication business, and the accommodation business, Uber coming as a newcomer, they starting with grassroots and disrupt the current, the transportation business. Airbnb and Facebook, they are the largest media company. So they start with a bottom-up disruptions. Today, what I'm strongly believe, the renewable energy nature offers opportunity for a bottom-up disruption. Why? First thing I mentioned a few times, renewable energy is not about energy, it's about technology. It's not driven by supply-demand balancing of commodities. It's by technology, what kind of, just the Moore's law curve. And the second thing is renewable energy is in a molecule nature. So think about fossil fuel plant. It involves like hundreds of millions investment. But for renewable energy, so thousands of US$ for solar panel and storage, even for wind turbine, so one single wind turbine, maybe $1 million US$. So it's in a molecule way. It's going to have a bottom-up disruption nature. So that's why once the technology is maturing, once the household and the user, building owner, are able to connecting this technology, this disruption and the revolution is going to happen. One example happened in China this year. Government planning is probably 15 gigawatt solar to be installed. But you know what? The end result is it end up with 50 gigawatt this year. You see, it's beyond the government imagination and the planning. It's start to showing the bottom-up disruption. I'm sure once the solar costs coming down, it's going to be much bigger than this number. So then that's the fundamental nature of this revolution. So once the renewable energy coming, what we see in our energy system is become very different. It was going to from a mainframe to a fragmented world. It's going to come from a closed energy system to an open energy system. So that's what we think. So it's a time to introduce a social network of machines. Why the social network of machines? So the first wave of internet business is social networks of humans. Social networks of humans offer opportunity for people communication, offer opportunity for sharing, for trading. But what's the purpose for social networks of machines, especially in energy world? The purpose is about synergy. You know, when the fragmentation comes in, so we see the energy system is made up with billions of solar panels, storage, windmills, and EVs. It's become very complicated. Probably it's going to run as a Brownian motion. So how can we achieve the synergy according to renewable energy production, according to weather pattern? How can we change the load and the consumption load with energy production? So that's why synergy comes from. For instance, so we put example is if 10% of Shanghai car running in EVs, so the Shanghai have to raise its energy capacity by 100%, and its infrastructure have to double again. So again, through the optimization of the social network machines, we actually can easily solve this problem by orchestrating the charging timing and the location. So that's why I think, what is the tools for orchestration? The most powerful thing is IoT, the Internet of Things. The IoT platform is going to able to connect these billions of devices and create a digital foundation upon on this physical and digital connectivity. Once open this connected world, it become an Android for energy system. We do need an Android for energy system. We have Android for mobile phone. We have social network for people, but we don't have Android for the energy world. So in Vision, we have built Energy OS, energy operating system for the world. Now it's already been the largest energy IoT platform and the ecosystem. We have been working with Microsoft, Accenture, and ARM to create a global energy IoT alliance. And at the moment, so on this platform, we are able to managing and orchestrating 100 gigawatt energy devices from the United States. The largest independent energy company pattern is running on Energy OS. We are helping Duke Energy to effectively managing distributed wind and solar. And in Europe, we are having the rising startup like Zonen to offer innovative energy solutions. In Asia, we're helping with China Guangdong Nuclear, we're helping with China Lighting Power to do all kinds of services. So what we want to say is, upon this digital energy layer, we are able to create application store. That application store is more like an Apple store. We can come up with all kinds of innovative solutions. So we are not going to become a typical energy utility. The future for energy company should be a company beyond energy, offering more innovative services. For instance, we are helping Zonen, a German leading energy storage company, to transfer to innovative energy suppliers. So that they are running on Energy OS, connecting around 50,000 devices around Germany and Italy, and make them to, in the household, offer them very low energy price. At the same time, they are using this energy storage to balancing the grid and offer other services as well. So this is a bottom up. of course, we still need a top-down. We are helping COP, a typical Hong Kong electrical utility company. They are running from generation, transmission and distribution and retail. We are helping them to go beyond electric utility company. We create IoT platform with COP together. Then we connecting all their customers together, and upon then, we turn them to become a new smart city operator, starting create a digital overlay upon our utility to introduce more services for the car parking, for science park, for building owners, for the all kind of logistic companies. So that's the future for utility. So that's why I want to say the future of energy should be defined by developers. So one example, what has happened in the telecommunication industry. In the telecommunication industry, the first wave is people building 3G, 4G, 5G, or broadband. Once all the infrastructure has been built up, the company, service company, application company, like Google, like Amazon, like Alibaba and WeChat, they are able to, using this connected assets, to create all kinds of new applications. So that's we think, strong believe, that's the future for energy. The future for energy is beyond energy. It's create a more interesting solution based on energy. Thank you.
Brilliant. That is almost overpowering, that vision. And I'm really delighted that the two of you could come, because I'm very excited about what is happening in China, and I have the opportunity to go and talk to decision makers like yourselves. But I want to show this on a global stage, that there is really a transformative momentum in the world of energy. Let us not underestimate it. We talked in the last panel about some of the constraints, the older ideas about what is happening. But if you have the largest grid in the world that is able to innovate at the speed that it is doing, with ultra-high voltage transmission, with the management of the load, with the kind of smart metering and so on, and then we have forward-looking CEOs that are creating a new dynamic in terms of energy is not just selling electricity. It is changing fundamentally the way our economies are organized and the businesses of the future. And I think it is going to be even more fundamental than the IT, information communication revolution. So, but let me ask you, Zhang Lei, I was with you and the CLP people were there, and you were working with the utilities to change all of this. But you started your business about 10 years ago.
Yes.
Nobody was thinking of this 10 years ago. How did you get to this point? Just tell us, what is the spark that led you here?
Because at that time I was working in London financial industry. But from financial point of view, I strongly believe the carbon risk is seriously underestimated. So it's greatest challenge for us, but also it also means greatest opportunity for investment and for us to change the world.
Yeah, and I think everything we were talking about in Kingsmill's presentation about disruption and change is going to happen very, very fast, and we need people like you to really give us the ideas and the infrastructure to do that. But let me just have a last question to you. When I was with you, you were discussing a new initiative you call Entopia. Can you share that a little bit, where you see this going and what the ethos of this initiative is?
Why we say is utopian means energy topian. So it's not utopian. Utopian is unexisting. Utopian is environment and energy topian. It's existing. It's built for energy world. So that's the vision. So now it's going to be a kind of action tank. So we gathering like-minded people like Amin's, so like Thierry, so he also joined us. So a few like-minded people, and we play with big project, big idea. We shape the big idea, big project. That's we say is about experimentation. So we shape the idea by experimentation. So that's the purpose of Entopia.
I think, you know, we can go on the whole day because just the discussion, I wanted to talk about electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, I wanted to talk about other things, but we don't have time. And I just want to thank you both for taking the time to be with us. I think that, you know, the signal you are sending to the world is that everybody 5-10 years ago saw China as a big risk for climate. Today we see China as a big opportunity for climate. Thank you for sharing your ideas with us. Great to have you here. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Adnan, for hosting all those sessions this morning already. I give you a bit of a breather now. So some exciting news we've heard from China and also in the previous session. It's my task now to lead into the next sessions where we will get up and close with some innovators and leaders. We've heard several times already how important it is to be pushing the boundaries, and I think our very first speaker is unrivaled when it comes to pushing the boundaries. I'm sure you all know him. He was the first pilot together with André Borschberg to circumnavigate the globe in a solar-powered aircraft, only solar-powered aircraft, thus showing the world that when it comes to renewable energy, not even the sky is the limit. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, Dr. Bertrand Piccard, explorer and chairman of Solar Impulse Foundation. Before we meet him up here on stage, let's just have a quick reminder of his amazing flight. Take a look.
Achieving the first solar flight around the world. This is the story of two men. Bertrand Piccard, psychiatrist and explorer, and André Borschberg, engineer and entrepreneur. A team driven by a vision of the future and a passion for innovation. And the first airplane of perpetual endurance, able to fly day and night without fuel. Together with their partners, they wanted to show the power of pioneering spirit and clean technologies to bring solutions for a better world. Solar Impulse, the adventure showing that change is possible.
It's a bit the moment of truth, because you know, you simulate, you calculate, you imagine, but there is nothing like testing and doing it in real. We deeply believe that we can achieve impossible and incredible things with renewable energies, like flying around the world with no fuel. And if this works, of course, everybody can do it on the ground to make a cleaner world. And this can be your way to be with us in the plane.
And this was a scene in Abu Dhabi early this Monday.
Dans ce journal également,
In fact, it is now ultralight plane is powered only by the sun's rays.
Between March and July 2015, Bertrand Piccard and André Borschberg flew without a drop of fuel from Abu Dhabi to Oman, across the Arabian Sea to India, Myanmar, China, Japan, and over the Pacific to Hawaii.
How are you feeling after all that time? You broke a world record in terms of solo flight a few hours ago.
Resuming the round-the-world adventure in April 2016, Solar Impulse continued from Hawaii to California and New York, across the Atlantic to Spain, then Egypt, and made it back successfully to Abu Dhabi in July. Today the challenge is no longer to conquer the moon. The challenge is to conquer quality of life on Earth. our world desperately needs the implementation of clean technologies to reduce the energy consumption and the waste of natural resources.
Hotel India Bravo, turning final, 02 right.
This airplane was not built to carry passengers, but to carry a message. The world could reduce half of its CO2 emissions by replacing old polluting devices with new clean technologies, like those used on Solar Impulse.
I am inspired by your pioneering spirit.
You know, Mr. Secretary General, if an airplane like Solar Impulse can fly day and night without fuel, the world, of course, can be much cleaner.
Inspiring generations, promoting innovative solutions to the challenges of humanity, inventing a brighter future. Solar energy made it possible to fly many days and nights in a row without fuel, crossing 2 oceans and remaining airborne longer than any jet plane in history. 2016 has seen the completion of this pioneering adventure, flying 40,000 kilometers round the world without a single drop of fuel.
More than an achievement in the history of aviation, Solar Impulse has made an achievement in the history of energy. Let's take it further.
Like Solar Impulse, the clean tech revolution has taken off, presenting new ways of thinking and doing to achieve the impossible. And you can be a part of it.
Good morning to everyone. You know, when I went to the aeronautic industry and I said that I wanted an airplane that could fly perpetually with no fuel at all, I got immediately the answer that it was impossible. And I asked why, and they said because it has never been done before. And this is the most stupid answer you can ever get, because it's precisely because it has not yet been done that we have to try. Of course, otherwise it will always be impossible. But if we go a little bit further into what they had in mind, they thought that the power of the sun would never be enough to power an airplane around the world. They were thinking only in terms of energy production. Of course, you cannot turn the power of the sun higher, but you can turn the consumption of the airplane lower. And this is exactly what is the mistake today. We always want to produce more energy, and we don't understand that we have to consume less. And that the most profitable business will not be the production of energy. It will be the energy savings. The other thing that was impossible in their mind was the fact that they thought that the plane could never be light enough and big enough to carry all the solar cells and to be energy efficient enough. So what do we have to do? Well, we had to turn away from the aeronautic industry and have the airplane been built in the shipyard. And for me, that was such an important message. If you go to the specialists, they will never understand where the change has to be. If you go to the experts, you will find people who are prisoners of the past, prisoners of old ways of thinking and doing. They are prisoners of their paradigm. So of course, if you want to change, you have to observe what is the paradigm that prevents you to change and change this paradigm. And I tell you that when I was flying around the world, I would like the previous slide, please. that was, for me, the founding moment of my vision of energy and my vision of technology, and also my vision of the world. I was flying over the Pacific, flying over the Atlantic in an airplane that could fly forever, several days and several nights in a row, capturing the energy from the sun, storing in the batteries to propel the motors 24 hours on 24 hours for several days in a row. And I was looking at the sun. I was looking at my 4 electric motors with huge propellers turning very slowly. There was no noise. There was no pollution. There was no fuel. And I could fly forever. And suddenly I thought, I'm in the future. I am in science fiction. And not at all. Not at all. I was only in the present. I was in what the clean technologies allow to do today. And then I understood that it's the rest of the world that is in the past. The rest of the world is in the past with old, polluting, inefficient devices. And of course, in terms of environment, it's a disaster. But in terms of economics, it's a stupidity. Because if we were to replace all the old polluting systems like internal combustion engines, badly insulated houses, inefficient light bulbs, heating and cooling systems, old industrial process, stupid grids compared to smart grids, if we were to replace all this with the modern technologies that exist today, it would be the biggest industrial market ever. It would not only allow to divide by 2 the energy consumption and the CO2 production that we have today, but it's also the way to boost growth, but a clean growth that is much better than the dirty status quo. So to please the ecologists, of course, it's not a growth in terms of more cars, of more pollution, of more consumption. No, it's the replacement of what is dirty today by something that is clean. It's a growth that is made by replacement, which allows us to be not only ecological, but to be logical. And I believe this is a really important message for the people who are not in this room. Because we are convinced already. We know about it. But when it comes to speaking of growth, clean technologies, and protection of the environment to climate change deniers, let's stop to speak about climate change. Let's stop to speak about protection of the environment. They don't care. Speak about job creation and profit and industrial growth. And at the end, the result will be exactly the same. It will be clean and profitable.
Do you care to take a seat? We just have a couple of minutes, but we want to make the most of it. I mean, this film showed very impressively. You just said, you know, everybody here, don't preach to the converted. Everybody here in the room knows what needs to be done. Now, the whole world was watching your flight that was completed 2 years ago. It was reported about, all the media channels boasted. Have you seen any change, any significant change? Has the world sort of caught up from the past and reach you in the future?
You know, I had a panel in Munich in January with Tom Enders, the CEO of Airbus. And he told me that all the engineers who were laughing at me in the beginning of the Solar Impulse project were now advising him to launch electric airplane programs. And I've been overtaken by the success of Solar Impulse. Because in the beginning, I was not daring to say that I wanted to promote clean aviation. I thought people will laugh at me. People will say, you're completely stupid. So I really said, it's not about aviation. It's about clean technologies for the rest of the world, for what is on the ground. And now it goes so fast that Airbus, Boeing, Wright Aviation, Uber, they're all working on electric propulsion for air transport. So I cannot be more pleased than I am now.
Indeed, you've achieved an awful lot, which leads me straight to my next question. Is there still scope for more? I mean, do you have any other project that you think you have to follow up now?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe you've seen one of the slides. It was the panel that was in front of the team, Take It Further. And this is exactly what we are doing now with the Solar Impulse Foundation. We have created the World Alliance for Efficient Solutions. And it will be the founding assembly, constituent assembly, Tuesday in the Bonn zone. And Adnan will be here also with us. The goal is to bring startups, companies, institutions, universities together, all the ones who have solutions that are profitable to protect the environment. There are thousands of them everywhere, but they are not known. They are not promoted enough. Even the big corporations like Solvay and Covestro and Engie, Air Liquide, they have a lot of solutions, but they are not implemented. So our goal with the Solar Impulse Foundation and the World Alliance is now to select the 1,000 most profitable solutions to protect the environment. This will be done in the next year until COP24. And then in 2019, I will go around the world again, but not with wings, but with a book of 1,000 solutions, and bring them to heads of states and big corporations. We'll make an official delegation with media and so on. So, like always, the heads of state will be happy to meet the media. But then they will have also to take the book of the 1,000 solutions. And the goal is to show them that the negotiations today don't need to be the smallest common denominator, the at minima result. We can be much more ambitious because we can base our negotiations on what exists, on technologies that exist, technologies that are profitable, and technologies that are ready to come on the market. So like this, we can bring them not just to push innovation by putting subsidies of public money, but rather to pull the innovation by making a legal framework that will make all these technologies necessary to reach the goals. And like this, I think we can really make a big difference.
I would like to pick up in the last question I have, and if we have time, then I allow one from the floor, if you keep it short. Pick you up on the word profitability that you just mentioned, and that you also basically finished your presentation off with. Now, I also know that you tweeted about it, because I looked onto your account. Basically converting people, including a president across the Atlantic. I think he's still in Asia right now, but he's back on his way back to Washington. Basically that you can only convince people to actually get on board embracing renewable energy and energy transformation by explaining to them that it's good for you, it's good for the economy. Now we have a room here full of converted, I call them the converted, who know all this already, but they have to go out, whether they represent corporates or whether they're policymakers or civil society, they have to go out and convince others. Do you have any other recommendation for them, how they can help that everybody is actually walking the talk?
Don't fight against others. Try to bring people together. Don't divide. Try to unite people and speak the language of the one you want to convince. The Greens have made a lot of bad results by fighting against mobility, comfort, growth, consumption, because it made a huge resistance. You have to speak the language of the one you want to convince. If you want to make America great again, you need to switch to renewable energies, to clean technologies, to sustainable infrastructures, because it's the only thing that will create growth and create jobs. It's the only thing. How can you imagine to have growth if you keep the dirty status quo we have today? People are not going to change their car. They're not going to insulate their house. They're not going to buy anything new. And this is why we have a stagnation today in the economy. We need to reactivate the wish of people to modernize what they have today. And this is a language of pure economy and pure politics.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I stick to my promise. If you quickly raise your hand, ask a very short question. This gentleman was first. Microphone, please, here in the first row. We have 1 minute, starting from the moment you have the microphone. Not for your question, including the answer. Off we go.
Thank you. Do you have plans to fly a bigger plane?
fly a bigger plane?
Yes.
Well, you know, I believe that in 8 years and 8 months, there will be airplanes transporting 50 passengers for short-haul flights. And I'm very precise for 8 years and 8 months, because since 1 year and 4 months, I'm saying in 10 years. So the countdown has started, and I promise you it will work. So next year, I will fly a solar airplane for 2 people and make very high altitude flights to show that really we can do a lot more with solar power. And then it will be the industry who will continue. I'm not someone from the industry. I'm an explorer, I'm a pioneer. So what I want is to push into the future much faster. So I will not fly myself with all these planes as an industrial, but I promise you, I enjoy flying very soon as a passenger in a solar airplane or an electric airplane.
And hopefully inspire many others. Bertrand Piccard, it was so good to have you here. And again, would have loved to talk more, but thank you so much. Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a look to Adnan, fit, ready to go, because you are going to handle our next gentleman from Moscow State University, Alexei Tarasov, and the rest I leave up to you.
Thank you, Monica. You know, it's such a great morning when you just talk about opportunity and change and good things that are happening and brilliant people who are making that happen. And that's what we've got in this room. And it's a very energizing experience to have my job. So if anybody wants to apply for it shortly, you're most welcome. But one of the delights of this has been to meet unexpectedly all kinds of people who are really at the frontiers of change. Now, staying with the solar theme, most of you would not expect, one, that Russia is interested in renewable energy, or two, that Russia is absolutely not interested in solar. So it has really been a wonderful experience to me. I already told you how I was beaten up by the OPEC and gas and Putin on a panel, but it's been really an experience to understand what is happening with the massive science and technology capability you have in Russia, and to meet some of the young people who are working around this and the companies that are investing in this. And I'm on the jury of the Russian Energy Prize, and the first year I was there was the first year we gave the prize to a renewable energy innovator, a scientist called Greitzel, who's working, leading the development of the perovskite cells. And those of you who don't know perovskite are about to find out, because we had solar based on silicon, which has dropped in price by 90% in the last 9 years and is going to drop by another 60%. But now we have the advent of new solar thin film technology in perovskites, which are potentially revolutionary in terms of the impact that they will have in the future. And there's a brilliant young scientist called Alexei Tarasov. Alexei, come and join me, who is leading a very interesting field of research in the Moscow State University. I was so delighted to meet him and to see what he's doing there. And he's going to tell us a little bit about his perovskite research, the potential of these cells, and how this technology actually could be a game changer for the future of solar. So, do you want to go there and do it? Or?
Sure, short presentation. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here. And I'd like to share with you some recent ideas about the modern photovoltaic today and how we, particularly my laboratory, are working on this in the country which is the biggest fossil energy producer in the world. So you know that the photovoltaic, they're technologies that converts the solar energy into the electricity. Currently we have quite a lot of various technologies, and here on this slide we have listed several of them. Most of us know the silicon photovoltaics is the most massive technology in this field, but there are quite a lot of them, namely the heterostructures, which has some special areas of implication, like the space and the very high efficiency but extremely very high costs of energy in this case. Organic photovoltaics, dye-synthesized solar cells, which the Michael Gretzel, the professor from Lausanne, has invented, who has received this year the Global Energy Prize in Russia for that. The quantum dots technology and Most of them are known for quite a lot of years. And I would like to share with you some ideas about the so-called perovskite solar cells. It's the most young technology among all others photovoltaics. And it was initially described for the first time, very first mentioning of this technology was in 2009, so less than 10 years ago. And in terms of the speed of development of this area, it seems to be one of the most successful cases in technologies now. It's close to be faster than the development of IT technologies last hundreds of years. Perovskites are cheap, efficient, and today the efficiency of that kind of cells exceeded 22%, which is the benchmark level for the silicon solar cells, but it's much cheaper. And it makes us possible to believe that that might be the new revolution, and not evolution, but revolution this time in the energetics. For not in this whole not a chemist, I just briefly show you a couple slides about how that looked like. The perovskite technology is thin film technology. The thickness of the active layer of perovskite solar cell is 300 times thinner than the silicon-based technology. They're supposed to be able to be very, very lightweight photovoltaic cells. And the perovskite is the special type of material. Here you see the wonderful picture of its crystal structure. It's a new type of hybrid organic and inorganic material, which is in the sandwiched between two supplementary layers, which conduct electron and holes. And if the perovskite layer absorbs the light, it generates holes and electrons, which are fed in the circuit and produce their electrical current. And in the world, since 2009, when the very first article was published in this area, quite a lot of efforts are done developing these technologies. And many countries, almost all top scientific countries in the world, are working on the perovskite technologies very fast. And in Russia, we were, saying honestly, jumping the last wagon of the train in 2015 when we started our initiative at Moscow State University, which is the biggest state university in Russia. We have launched our own initiative on the research into perovskite solar cells. And today, as you could see on the graph here on the right side of the slide, the number of publications in this area was dramatically increased over the 8 years. So the first article was in 2009, then no article at all, then again one, and starting 2014, this the explosion, the meteoric rise of the number of publications and the efficiency which this technology can achieve. And today is 22.6%, which is amazing. In our case in Russia, we started 2015 our own initiative. Remarkably, we did it together with support from Russian Science and Education Ministry. For sure, that's their job. But the company who supported our research and who is the developer of our inventions in terms of technological application and commercialization of them is the Renewable Energy company. It's the largest, world's largest independent hydroelectricity producer and one of the biggest traditional, let's say, hydro energy producers in Russia. And we were successful. We developed, described a new family of compounds, and based on them we developed a new kind of perovskite solar cell production technology that was published this year, and now we are patenting the whole family of that methods to produce this kind of material for solar cells usage. So here are our most recent results, which we achieved very recently. We can produce, using this technology, the big films of perovskite with a top quality. First we did 10 to 10 centimeters together with our colleagues from Japan. Now it's 20 to 30 centimeters, and we don't see any limitation here to boost further this technology, which makes the real possibility of large-scale production of perovskite solar cells. It's not like the laboratory samples with a few centimeters squared. It's already in the numbers of square meters of production of perovskite solar cells possible. And this makes us very optimistic about the future of perovskites. The estimations which we saw a few months ago in the literature, that the cost of perovskite solar energy could be about 5 € kilowatt an hour, which is already lower than the costs of the classical energy we can buy today. And the important is that in this case we can change the paradigm of electricity generation from the massive generation of the power stations to the local ones, which could be paid back in the very short terms because the perovskite technology is also very cheap. So yeah, this is the basic idea, and thank you for your attention.
So I met Alexei in Moscow, and we discussed this over a couple of glasses of vodka, but when I woke up in the morning, it was still real. And it was really amazing to talk to him, because if you look at this technology, you look at the fields of solar panels we have out there which are based on silicon. There's a huge process to produce that. That has an environmental impact also. We have to put a lot of energy into producing silicon. So what this does, perovskite, and the reason that you haven't heard about it, because it's relatively new and it hasn't achieved the level of possibility that other technologies have, but there have been new breakthroughs. So this is like a thin film. It can be applied in many instances, so you can tell us what the potential applications are, like buildings and so on, which is a huge thing for countries that have limited land area. But the problem has always been efficiency. How do you get efficiency reliably to close to polysilicon? And silicon is about 24%, and you've managed to now achieve 22%. Do you believe that this is a reliable 22% that is replicable, that is scalable? That's one question. And the other is, in terms of cost, talk about the cost of technology, not the cost of power generation, because that varies from market to market. But the cost of the technology compared to polysilicon, what do you see happening here?
Thank you for your question. I think that first we should mention, don't forget that the perovskite solar cells, perovskite technology has like 4 years of experience, 4 years of history. And until the last year, we added a couple % to the efficiency, the top level efficiency of solar cells. So it's very rapidly developing area. And the remarkable feature of perovskite solar cells is that we combine in this case both the high efficiency, it's over 22% now, with the very low production costs. We don't need to melt the silicon, you don't need to clean, to recrystallize the silicon to make it clear, to cut it in the pieces and so on. You don't need any high temperature treatment in this case. It's almost, in our case, in the case of technology which we are developing now in Moscow State University, it's about not more than 100 degrees C, 150 at least. So it's very low temperature process, and you don't need to spend a lot of energy on this. And I believe that in case of perovskites, it will be a new revolution, because we have at the same time very high efficiency and very low costs, which can make feasible the application of solar cells in the areas where the payback time was before quite long, and now it's this area are opened for the innovation. So we can add additional generation in that area to cover the requirements of the global economy and new sources of the energy.
So the cost of production of perovskite cells compared to silicon will be, I've heard estimates of 1/10?
Okay, I would say 1/3, something like that. 1/4, 1/10 is to be too optimistic, but let's see.
So we could have perovskite cells that cost 1/4 of the current cheap solar photovoltaics that we use.
Yeah, we believe in this.
And the efficiency will be reliable?
I think yes, because one of the key problems in perovskite solar cells for a while was the stability. So the first solar cells, you won't believe us, but in scientific community we know that first solar cells which were studied like 5 years ago, it was sometimes heavy to bring them from production to the measurement station. So they were degrading in the minutes Today we have a lot of articles and a lot of scientists in the world who developed their technology to protect the stability of perovskite solar cells up to thousands of hours in ambient solution in very elevated temperature. So they are quite stable now, and they show that, yes, this is the reliable 20% at least.
So where are the applications? Can they cover buildings? And
it's also very interesting because if we have the perovskite solar cell, they can be semi-transparent. So in case of silicon, where you could potentially gain the 22% or 22%, you will never have some transparent film or transparent source. So you always have to install it on there like a farm. Yeah? And in case of perovskite, you can make it semi-transparent. So if you make the tinted glass, for example, to cover the skyscrapers, to cover this building, for example, or to cover the buildings in Saudi Arabia, where you don't need so much illumination inside, you need to reflect some light to cool down the building. What if you not reflecting this light, but consuming it and producing some electricity? That may be the potential answer. And in this case, all other technologies are not possible to implement and to feed them in this area.
Well, you know, the potential is amazing. So how far away do you think we are from commercialization?
I think it's the question of about 5 years at least.
So 5 years down the road, we could see a revolutionary change in solar technology.
Yeah. In 5 years, because I know that several companies in the world are working on their own technologies. There are not that much independent patented technologies where you could, using which you can produce the perovskite solar cell but your own. Yeah. There are like 5, maybe 7 totally patentable independent areas. And, most of them are developing now and trying now to enter their commercialization stage.
Excellent. You know, normally in these formats we meet politicians and bankers and bureaucrats. We rarely see the scientists who are actually working on these things and looking at the future in a different way. Alexei is one of those. I'm very pleased that he joined us. And I think it's extremely significant that this research is also happening in the Russian Federation, which, as you said, is the biggest hydrocarbon producer in the world, where the mindset has also started to change, and where we launched our renewable energy roadmap for Russia together with the Russian Minister for Energy. There's been a very strong appreciation of what the future of energy could be as it changes. President Putin has expressed that. And I think that we are going to see that there are going to be fewer and fewer countries that don't believe that the future of energy is going to be radically different and are preparing themselves for this change. Russia will be one of those. So thank you very much, Alexei, for coming. I know we have limited time, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Adnan. Thank you, Alexei. This way. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have one more innovator, leader before the lunch break. But he's a very important one, because without him, we wouldn't be here today, because he happens to be the CEO of this very building and the company that belongs to it. I'm talking about Deutsche Post DHL, of course, one of the world's biggest, most important mail and logistics groups with some 500, more than 500,000 employees. We heard already this morning that Deutsche Post DHL is committed to reducing all logistics-related emissions to net zero by the year 2050. To do so, the company currently operates the largest electric fleet here in Germany. Ultimately, it plans to replace its entire mail and parcel delivery fleet with electric vehicles powered by renewables, of course. And we now have the opportunity to hear all of that firsthand. Please welcome the CEO of Deutsche Post DHL Group, Frank Appel. Good to have you here.
Yeah, so good afternoon, I have to say already. So welcome in our nice building here. I'm very pleased, of course, being in the center of COP23. I will only show you 3 pages, but before I do that, I think it's important to remind us all what the different roles are we play in that field. So we have the governments who play a role in, first of all, acknowledging that we have a problem, which I think COP21 has done, and set clear targets. Second, we need companies like ourselves to set up demand for change. And then we have scientists like Alexei, you know, to really come up with new solutions. And I'm an interesting person anyway because I'm a chemist as well and studied kind of stuff that long way back before I went doing something differently. So it's interesting to see when I go to Davos, I always go to the scientific sessions because it's much more encouraging what world can we do. So I think with COP21, a big step has already taken place because the, you know, appreciation of the problem is there. So I'm very confident that we are on the right journey. I hope that governments will not now dictate the technology to solve a problem because that would be dangerous. We should let companies and science solve the problem instead of saying, this is the right technology, this is the only way, and you have to do that. This will limit innovation. So that leads to our role, which is to set goals. So in 2008, when I got into the office, we said at that time, and probably my colleague talked already about that, we have to reduce our carbon footprint. We are a big emitter of carbon, so we have to do something. We said by 2020, we want to have 30% more efficiency. And we had no clue at that time how to do that. You know, we achieved that already 4 years earlier last year to improve our carbon efficiency by 30%. But what encouraged us more, before I come to on the right side of the page, what encouraged, when we set that goal, there was only one other company in the logistics industry, which is actually was recently acquired, TNT, who said the same as we have to do something. Now, any postal operator, large postal operator, clear carbon reduction goal. I just saw most of them last Friday. And they all have clear goals, and the logistics do as well. So we created a role model that people said, okay, you know, otherwise we have a competitive disadvantage and a higher cost. So that led us to the conclusion in last year, because we already 4 years ahead, we should be completely carbon-free by 2050. So we don't know which technology will lead to us anyway, but we have a big fleet of airplanes, we have a big fleet of trucks, delivery vans. I have no doubt, if we generate demand, there will be producers who will help us to reach that goal. What our role is as corporates is we have to generate demand. If you say you need electric airplanes, nobody will produce that. If you say we want to have electric or whatever technology is surviving to be carbon-free, you know, the airplane producers and the engine producers think about that. If I'm first, I will make the money. And that's what I think corporates have to do. They have to set clear goals for themselves, ambitious goals, and that will drive innovation and will solve the problem. That's the reason. So to have interim targets, we put something, you can read it here. You know, of course, we have to become more efficient until 2025. We want to have more electric or carbon-free last mile delivery. We want to plant trees every year, and we want to train our people as well. And finally, we also want to sell products which are green. So 2 examples for that, our street scooter. So a couple of years ago, we said we need electric vehicles to be more sustainable and more cost efficient, because pickup and delivery is stop and go. That's a perfect application of electric vehicles. The problem was we couldn't find a commercial viable solution. So therefore, we went around and looked, and we found a startup from a German university, and they said, let's design something to cost, which feeds our purpose. We don't care about other markets. We have such a big fleet with 92,000 vehicles. We have enough demand. Design something together with us which fits our purpose. So they did that. Now we have already almost 5,000 of these on the road. Next year we will produce 20,000, and we have started to sell them to other parties. So from scratch, in a couple of years, faster than some other producer for electric vehicles, we reached a certain level of volume. So that's a great story, because that tells you how much change you can do. So that's one, and that is extremely successful for us. And last one, this building is also not only nice, it's 15 years old, and it was already at that time 30% more carbon efficient than anything else. You know, you don't expect that in the first place because you see so much glass, but don't underestimate how much it helps in winter when the sun is low, and it goes through 2 layers of glass, and it warms up the building very nicely. So we use significantly less energy than comparable classical built facilities. And I only wanted to mention that this is a tiny thing, how you can improve your carbon footprint. But because here today, here our guests, you know, I'm very proud that this is also a role model building somehow for many dimensions. So thank you very much. That was just our commitment to helping the world to become a better place. Thank you.
Would you care to take a seat? So thank you very much. I mean, then this is the perfect setting, obviously, for our conference today. And I was just listening. I mean, if you, the CEO of one of the world's leading logistics companies, can achieve that, converting the fleet to go use electric vehicles, then others should be able to do that too. Now, I don't know how many CEOs do we have in here? Do you want to out yourself? Or you just stay quiet and listen to maybe an advice that you have for those CEOs, ideally CEOs who also have to do with logistics or maybe even car manufacturers, how to go about it, because it's possible.
Yeah, so what I have learned, and this is not only for carbon efficiency, you know, you have to set midterm, long-term goals for yourself, because what happens in an organization like the 2020 goal, 30% efficiency, we only launched it, the organization didn't believe in that. So 2 years later, then they saw the first progress. They said, you know, the goal is set anyway, we can't divert from that anyway, so now let's make it happen. So I think what really works well, you have to be clear, you have to set the aspiration. Like we said now for 2015, I joke with the team very often, I say, I'm 89 if I'm still around, please invite me. I'm pretty sure that you will achieve it. So I'm happy to celebrate with you, even if I'm not around for a long time already. So I think aspirations are key. And then we need people who with technology, like we've heard before, who help us to develop it. And don't tell us it has to be silica or iodine or whatsoever. The best technology should succeed. And if we put money into that field, we will see great results and I think great solutions to the problem. So CEOs should set aspirational goals. And then, you know, I think we can generate the demand which is necessary.
Okay, well, I keep my fingers crossed that you can celebrate with your team at 89 and even beyond. But mentioning your team, I mean, how did you, you became CEO of Deutsche Post DHL Group in 2008, and you said you already then basically set out the roadmap for renewable energy and converting your fleet. How did you get everybody on board, the team, the board members, maybe even the stakeholders?
Yeah, I think this is what leadership is all about. I think you have to make clear that, you know, that you have no doubts. You know, at that time, it was already clear that we have a problem with carbon emission. The world has a problem. So that was long before COP21 in Paris. But, you know, I'm a scientist. You know, you can't neglect the facts. So that for me, it was clear. We are a big polluter. We have to do something ourselves. And we actually generated a competitive edge, which we didn't anticipate at that moment. But customers are, you know, they don't pay for it, that's for sure, but they demand more and more, and that's right. And if you have answers, it gives you a competitive edge, and that's, you know, what actually convinced also my colleagues, saying, you know, we will save some money because less fuel is better for the cost base, but we also will generate a competitive edge.
Talking of a competitive edge, certainly in corporate terms, I mean, it's a business, you need to deliver a profit. How long do you think it'll take until your investment in renewable energy, in converting your fleet, will actually pay off in profit?
So, you know, if I look back, it has already contributed to our profits. Our green team is calculating that all the time, how much they have already, by saving fuel, energy, and whatsoever, has contributed. I believe that if you take the street scooters, our electric vehicles, they already break even on total cost of ownership to a classical combustion engine-driven car. So if battery prices are coming further down, as I guess, you know, it will be a very attractive business case for us.
All right, Frank Appel, we do have a couple of minutes. I didn't ask you beforehand, so it's perfectly all right. Also because we are slightly over time in terms of lunch. But if there was one question from the floor, would you feel comfortable?
Yes, of course.
Absolutely, because we are your guests and everybody will be polite. Do you have a question? If so, then
You're
quickly raise your hand.
You know, you can ask me any question.
There's a gentleman right here in the front. Sorry, he was just like a split second ahead of you in the back there, and the microphone is on its way.
I'm Claude Thomas, I'm a member of European Parliament, and what we see now, we discuss cars and CO2, but we see an explosion of vans, which is the result of Amazon, eBay, and so on. So the van, number of vans and the kilometers of vans are going up. Do you see, would you confirm this basically relation, and Personally, I think that we need to put much more attention now on vans, also because in the big cities, a lot of pollution comes through them, and I think the people in the city will go tram and bike and so on, but we need a solution for the logistics to the big cities.
So first of all, that's the reason why we created these electric vehicles. We have them now also as vans, so we can deliver parcels, electric or carbon-free with electric vehicles. Second, people usually completely overestimate the footprint of a parcel, what the carbon footprint is. So if you want to drive, in Germany, if you want to drive with the average carbon emitter or car, you can drive around 3 kilometers to create the same footprint as a parcel. So if volumes are double, it's only 1.5. So there are not too many places where you can go with a car for 1.5 kilometers to get your stuff. So I think the story that the delivery of e-commerce is bad for the economy is probably not very proven, because if people drive to the grocery stores or in the city, they drive significantly more, and very often they only buy brown product as well. So we can combine that. We do already grocery delivery. So I think it's important, and if we have only electric vehicles, it's carbon-free anyway. So, and as I said, pickup and delivery is the perfect application. You have energy, no energy, energy, no energy, and that's the reason why it's so efficient, and that's the reason why we said already 5 years ago, we need electric vehicles. Whatever the governments are doing, we need them because they will be the most efficient in assuming battery costs are coming down. And our electric vehicle doesn't have to drive 400 kilometers. They can only drive 100 kilometers and 80 kilometer speed because we don't need that. The reach is not important for us. That's the reason why they are already, at the moment, economically viable. They will be even more economically viable if the price of batteries halves, and that probably will happen in the next 2 years. So we have a very attractive model, but the myth is that parcel delivery is bad. The carbon footprint is very little in comparison to what private consumers are doing when they drive around with a normal car.
So you say, we need electric vehicles, and it doesn't matter what the governments are doing, which means you say CEOs of whatever company, they have to take responsibility and not point the finger at policymakers and say, sorry, the framework just doesn't work for me.
I think our job is to create commercial demand for these. And maybe a fuel cell might be better than batteries, and we couldn't care less. We have to reduce our carbon footprint to zero. That's our commitment. Whichever technology will succeed, we will deploy. At the moment, battery is the only one you can do. But if there are better technology or iodine or whatsoever, you can go out here. We have a truck with a thin layer of solar panel as well. We can put them on every roof of our trucks, 5% carbon reduction, straight away, 5%. So it's very easy. So we are experimenting with that. Whatever technology will win, I don't care. And I'm afraid of that governments are ruling technology. This is the worst. If you are a governmental authority, don't decide which technology. Set standards how we have to reduce our carbon footprint, but let the market decide which technology is the best. Because I don't know, and there is so much innovation possible. I think that's my plea always for government should not say it's battery, because then we will hinder innovation. We will stop innovation, because there might be something which is better than batteries. And then that should win.
All right, Frank Appel, it's time for lunch. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. Thank you. Before you leave, ladies and gentlemen, just very briefly, lunchtime is correct. You find catering just outside the door, but then also if you just walk across past the cloakroom and the registration, you find the room Nairobi, also with catering. Be sure to be back here at 1:45 when we continue. We will hear from the governor of California, Jerry Brown will be here. We will hear the mayor of Bonn, the COP23 host city, of course, and we have 2 more stellar panels. So enjoy your meals. When you hear the gong, please return to the room. Thank you.